Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Lenway. Nicole Lenway, also known as Nikki Len Ford, was born on July 11, 1989, in a small town in Minnesota. There is little information available about her parents and early life. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was young, and her mother raised her alone, providing her with a good education. Nikki was an exceptional student and athlete, excelling in track and field and martial arts. She decided to dedicate her life to fighting crime and served in law enforcement. After graduating with honors from the police academy, she moved to Minneapolis and joined the Criminal Investigation Department as an assistant investigator. Colleagues described Nikki as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer, ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, she became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. In 2012, at a martial arts competition, 23-year-old Nicole met Timothy "Tim" Ama, a coach and martial arts master who was 8 years her senior. Timothy, a gentleman man, won Nikki's heart with his charming nature and kind gestures. He demonstrated his reliability and care, making Nikki fall deeply in love with him. They started a romantic relationship and moved in together. Initially, everything was wonderful, and Nikki felt happy and loved. However, Timothy's behavior began to change gradually. He revealed his true nature, but subtly enough that Nikki wasn't alarmed at first. Behind his charming facade, Timothy was a sophisticated tormentor who enjoyed flirting with other women, even in Nikki's presence. This behavior hurt and humiliated Nikki, making her feel insecure. Nikki had hoped that Timothy would eventually settle down and become more restrained, but months passed and his behavior didn't change. He continued to flirt and engage in affairs, assuring Nikki that he loved only her. When Nikki confronted him, he would snap at her, saying she had no right to tell him what to do. He would later apologize, telling Nikki that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she would forgive him. The situation escalated in the fall of 2014 when Timothy flew into a rage during a minor argument, grabbing Nikki by the throat and choking her until she almost lost consciousness. He then pushed her into a wall, making her realize that she was in an unhealthy relationship. However, her emotional attachment to Timothy was too strong, and she forgave him once again. Timothy's behavior towards Nikki was extremely controlling and jealous. He would constantly monitor her movements, check her phone and social media without her permission, and accuse her of infidelity without any evidence. Despite his own infidelity, he would manipulate Nikki into believing that no one would ever love her as much as he did, trapping her in the relationship. In November 2015, after a violent argument, Nikki gathered her belongings and left the house. Timothy, who didn't believe she would actually leave, chased her down, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back inside. However, Nikki's screams and struggles attracted the attention of their neighbors, forcing Timothy to back down. Finally, free from the abusive relationship, Nikki felt a sense of relief. But Timothy didn't give up. He shifted his tactics from threats and blackmail to romantic gestures, sending flowers and messages filled with tenderness, pleading for another chance. For a month, Nikki stood firm, refusing to return to him. However, her plans were disrupted when she discovered she was pregnant in December 2015. Nikki knew that if Timothy found out, he would use it to manipulate her into getting back together. She tried to keep her pregnancy a secret, but their mutual friends and acquaintances soon informed Timothy, who urged her to return to him, arguing that their child should grow up in a complete family. Nikki, who grew up without a father, understood the challenges of single parenthood, but she also recognized that being with a manipulative and cruel person like Timothy would be detrimental to her and the child. Despite still having feelings for him, she refused to reunite with her ex-boyfriend, but she did agree to let him participate in their child's life as a nominal father. Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy named Callahan Amer on June 20, 2016. The father, Tim, acknowledged paternity and initially expressed a desire to raise the child with Nicole. However, it soon became clear that Tim was not interested in being a good father and only wanted to use the child as a tool to manipulate Nicole. Nicole took almost a year of maternity leave to care for her son, devoting herself entirely to motherhood. Meanwhile, Tim continued his carefree life with multiple lovers and casual connections. He even had a system in place where he would signal to his lovers when he was available by turning on a purple light in his bedroom. In 2016, Tim started living with his 18-year-old protege, Colin, who had been deeply in love with him since she was 14. Despite the significant age difference, the couple hid their relationship from outsiders, claiming Colin was just renting a room in Tim's house. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work as a forensic expert at the Maine Police Headquarters in Minneapolis. With her unpredictable work schedule, she would often ask Tim to look after their son, mainly because she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father and to save on nanny costs. However, Tim would always shift the responsibility onto Colin, who developed a fondness for the little boy and enjoyed taking care of him. Tim would tell Colin that Nicole was a bad mother who didn't want to care for her child and was looking for excuses to offload her son onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nicole started a new romantic relationship with a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford, who treated her with tenderness and care and expressed a desire to adopt Callahan. However, when Tim found out about their relationship, he became enraged and decided to use their son and the naive Colin to destroy Nicole's new relationship. Tim would regularly report to social services that Donovan was abusing Callahan and that Nicole was doing nothing to stop it, resulting in frequent visits from Child Protective Services. For years, Nicole and her new partner were subjected to harassment and intimidation by her ex-boyfriend, Timothy, who falsely accused them of domestic violence. Timothy convinced Colin, a friend, that Nicole and her partner were a danger to their son, Callahan, and that they might harm him. Timothy continued to psychologically manipulate Colin, convincing him that Callahan was in danger and that Nicole and her partner were cruel to him. Meanwhile, Timothy harassed and threatened Nicole and her partner, even filing false police reports against them. Donovan tried to have a calm and rational conversation with Timothy, but it didn't work. Timothy continued to terrorize Nicole and her partner, making their lives a living hell. He eventually took the matter to court, claiming he wanted sole custody of their son. Nicole was terrified, knowing Timothy's ability to lie and manipulate. She understood that he didn't actually care about their son's well-being. He just wanted to punish her for moving on with her life. Meanwhile, Nicole decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed to her and her family. She was confident that she would gain custody of their son, but she knew the legal battles could drag on for years. During this time, Timothy continued to concoct fabricated stories, including a false accusation that Nicole had tried to run him over with her car. However, he couldn't provide any evidence to support his claim. In September 2022, the custody case went to court, with Timothy accusing Nicole of harming their son. However, the court saw through his lies and awarded sole custody to Nicole. Despite this, Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. He was eventually allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to minimize conflict between parents. However, on April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son, a mysterious attacker dressed in black clothing and a mask approached her, shot her 4 times at close range, and quickly disappeared. Incredibly, Nicole remained conscious and managed to call emergency services despite being severely injured. A woman happened to be driving by when she heard shots fired and saw a black figure jump into a vehicle and speed away. She immediately pulled over to ensure the shooter was gone, then rushed to help the victim, Nicole. The woman explained what had happened to the dispatcher, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, ultimately saving her life. Nicole spent several days in a coma, teetering on the brink of life and death. She lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were affected, but doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky, as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery and the other nearly struck her heart. When Nicole regained consciousness, she reported to the police that her ex-lover, Timothy, was the one who had shot her. The police interrogated Timothy, who had a solid alibi since he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, as confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. The investigation also explored the possibility that someone among the criminals Nicole had previously arrested might have organized the attack. 4 casings were found at the scene, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. An eyewitness reported seeing the same vehicle, which led the police to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, Timothy mentioned owning a Chevrolet Traverse SUV and a Dodge Challenger, but not a pickup. However, the investigation revealed that Timothy was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. When shown the surveillance footage, Timothy admitted to owning the pickup, but claimed he rarely used it. The vehicle was equipped with colorful stickers, which were verified, but appeared to have been applied recently. While all the evidence was circumstantial, the police needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It was discovered that Timothy's vehicle had a satellite navigation system, allowing the tracing of the vehicle's entire route. The system revealed that the car was brought to the back entrance of a Tando school on the evening of April 18th, where it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced the vehicle's route, showing it arrived with license plates. The evening after the incident, the car used in the crime was found, but without the perpetrators. The person who drove the car that day was short and slender, with a feminine silhouette from a distance. As a result, the police decided to detain and question Amma's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search of their home was also conducted, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, the police discovered ammunition of the same caliber. Colin, who was frightened, soon began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that Timothy had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating Colin, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word. She felt sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that Timothy had provided her with the firearm and had taken it back after the assassination attempt, but she didn't know what he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, but Colin's confession was the decisive factor. The court also considered the testimony of the victim, Nicole, about Timothy's manipulative nature and his ability to deceive the women who loved him. Timothy Amma was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting, and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Colin Larson received 16 years in prison as the executive. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole fully recovered physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and he became a loving father to Callahan. The now married Ford couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life will be the child's godmother. It should be added that Timothy will be eligible for parole in 2035, but he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members, and from attempting any form of... Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kathy Martin. Kathy Martin was born on October 25, 1959, in Houston, Texas, and grew up in a loving family where she was especially close to her sister. In high school, she met Mike, and a few years later, they tied the knot. The couple settled in a quiet Houston suburb where they soon started a family with the birth of their daughter. 3 years later, Kathy became pregnant again, and in early 1987, they welcomed a son. At just 27 years old, Kathy was now a mother of 2. After her second child was born, Kathy dedicated herself to full-time motherhood, focusing on raising her children. Mike worked at his father-in-law's small sign factory, providing a stable income for the family. Kathy's parents also offered financial support, enabling her to devote all her time to the kids. On March 3, 1987, Kathy was at home with the children as usual, while Mike was at work. After his shift ended, he decided to meet up with friends and headed to a bar. Mike attempted to call his wife from a payphone, but she didn't answer, a rare occurrence, as Kathy rarely had the chance to leave the house even for a few minutes. Mike tried calling her several more times, but still got no response. Worried, Mike called their neighbor, Tim, and asked him to check on Kathy. Tim went to their house and knocked on the door, but received no answer. Peering through the living room window, he noticed the TV was on, so he persisted in knocking, but there was only silence. Tim's concern grew that something might have happened to Kathy. Rather than returning home to call Mike or the police, he got in his car and drove around town searching for patrol officers. After a few minutes of driving, he spotted a police car and explained the situation to the officers, requesting they check on Kathy. When the police arrived at the house and received no response to their knock, they tried the door handle and found it unlocked. Upon entering the house, they immediately found Kathy's daughter lying on the living room sofa, unconscious and displaying visible signs of trauma, but still alive. The officers quickly called for an ambulance and continued to inspect the other rooms. In the bedroom, the officers found the younger child in his crib, safe and unharmed. However, in another room, they were met with a gruesome scene. Kathy lay on the floor, bloodied and lifeless. She was naked, and the police quickly determined that she was the victim of a heinous crime. Her hands were bound with a lamp cord, a disturbing indicator of the brutality she had endured. The paramedics rushed Kathy's daughter to the hospital, and the investigators began meticulously examining the crime scene. Kathy's father arrived shortly after, but the police withheld the details of the tragedy from him. Instead, they requested that he go to the hospital to be with his granddaughter when she awoke. As Kathy's father waited at the hospital, he was shocked to learn about his daughter's murder from a news report on TV. Meanwhile, Mike arrived at the house, and the police were immediately struck by his suspicious behavior. Not only did he show up late, but there were also telltale bloodstains on his shirt. The police asked him to surrender his clothes and answer their questions, their scrutiny intensifying with each passing moment. Investigators made several intriguing discoveries. Firstly, they found numerous bloodstains in the bathroom, indicating that the perpetrator had attempted to clean up the crime scene. This suggested that the attacker had lingered in the house for some time rather than fleeing immediately after the murder. Secondly, forensic experts detected no signs of forced entry. All windows and doors, except the front door, were locked, implying that Kathy either let the attacker in voluntarily or they had a key. The police also observed another peculiar detail. All of Kathy's clothes were neatly folded on the floor beside her body. This not only hinted at the possibility of sexual assault, but also seemed strange that the attacker had taken the time to fold her clothes with such care. The detectives hypothesized that the assailant might have threatened to harm her children if she screamed or refused to comply with their demands. Kathy may have acquiesced to their demands solely to protect her children, only to be killed afterwards. Kathy's daughter was fighting for her life after being brutally beaten, likely with bare hands. After several hours in the hospital, she fell into a coma, and her chances of survival remained dire. Medical experts examined Kathy's body and determined that she had suffered 16 stab wounds, primarily in the abdominal area. They also confirmed that she had been sexually assaulted and managed to extract biological material from the perpetrator. However, during that time, DNA analysis was not yet widely used in forensic science, so the experts could only determine the perpetrator's blood type. From the early hours of the investigation, the police zeroed in on the victim's husband, Mike, after noticing suspicious stains on his shirt. They seized his clothing for examination, and Mike's behavior that evening also raised eyebrows. After work, he went out with friends, but instead of going home, he asked a neighbor, Tim, to check on his wife, a tactic detectives had seen before, where a husband committed the murder and created an alibi. The police also uncovered that Mike had a checkered past. Right after high school, he was arrested for selling drugs to an undercover cop and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, although he only served 2 before being released on parole. Later, he married Kathy, but the police needed more evidence to charge him. The detectives also launched an investigation into Tim, the neighbor, whose behavior seemed suspicious. Rather than calling the police from his home, he drove around town searching for patrol officers. A search of Tim's car revealed suspicious stains on the floor mats that resembled blood. Forensic experts determined that Kathy's death had occurred around 10 p.m., approximately 6 hours before her body was discovered. This led the detectives to probe the suspect's whereabouts long before the evening and their actions after the murder. Both Mike and Tim claimed to have been at work, prompting the police to verify their alibis. 2 days after the murder, the hospital contacted the detectives with a breakthrough. Kathy's daughter had suddenly regained consciousness, and her life was no longer in danger. Investigators rushed to interview her, hoping she could provide insight into the events, but the 4-year-old girl had almost completely lost her memory of that day. She vaguely recalled a man with light hair entering their house, though both her father and Tim had dark hair. The detectives received an unexpected update from the lab, forcing them to reassess the case. The experts' analysis revealed that the stains on the neighbor's car mats were mere machine oil, and those on the husband's shirt were just paint. Furthermore, multiple colleagues of Mike and Tim, who worked in different fields, corroborated that the 2 men had been at their workplaces all day and hadn't left until evening. This eliminated both men as suspects, as they hadn't had the opportunity to commit the crime at Kathy's house. The police, who had been convinced of one of the suspects' involvement, found themselves back at the starting point. They refocused on other potential suspects familiar with the victim and capable of entering her house without raising suspicions. As detectives questioned Kathy's relatives and friends, asking who they thought might be responsible, they discovered an intriguing pattern. Many of them, without hesitation, named one person, Greg. Greg, Kathy's brother-in-law, was flagged as a suspect due to his troublesome behavior, which her loved ones revealed she had frequently complained about. According to Kathy, Greg would openly flirt with her and persistently try to persuade her into intimate encounters. Moreover, he would often make inappropriate remarks about her stomach, a detail that aligned with the majority of stab wounds being located in that area. The police investigation uncovered Greg's history of illegal substance abuse and criminal past, prompting detectives to focus on him. They soon found a promising lead, a fingerprint and hair at Kathy's house matching Greg's. However, this evidence was not conclusive, as Greg regularly visited Kathy and her husband, potentially leaving behind the prints and hair prior to the murder. Kathy's parents were convinced of Greg's guilt. Her mother shared a telling anecdote. During a late-night hospital visit with her granddaughter, Greg appeared, causing the girl to glance at her grandmother with an unmistakable look of fear. After hearing this testimony, the detectives summoned Greg for questioning. He categorically denied any involvement in the murder, claiming to have been with a friend at the time, a friend with a notable criminal record. Mid-interrogation, Greg requested a brief absence to pay for additional parking time, allegedly to avoid a ticket, but he never returned to the station. Greg's wife's sister later recounted that on the day of the murder, Greg dropped her off at work around 10:30 a.m. and picked her up at 2:30 p.m., leaving him a 4-hour window that coincided with the time of the murder, providing a plausible opportunity to kill Kathy. Despite these suspicious circumstances, the police still lacked concrete evidence to link Greg to the crime. As a last resort, they decided to analyze the semen sample taken from the victim's body. At the time, forensic experts could only determine the blood type of the sample's owner. The blood type of the sample from Kathy's body matched Greg's, but this finding did not conclusively prove his guilt. Investigators were unable to make an arrest based on the available evidence, prompting a continued search for additional proof. However, despite their efforts, they were ultimately unable to prove Greg's involvement. The case eventually stalled, leaving Kathy's family frustrated and convinced of Greg's guilt, yet powerless to act. Meanwhile, Shelley, Kathy's sister, refused to accept that her husband was capable of such a heinous crime and chose to continue living with him in the years that followed. Detectives revisited the case in 1998, 11 years after the murder, seeking DNA analysis on the remaining semen sample. However, they only got a partial DNA profile, which showed Greg belonged to the 2% of the population matching it. When questioned, Greg changed his story, claiming a consensual relationship with Kathy, but detectives were skeptical, knowing such shifts are common in murder cases. Despite suspicions, they couldn't convict without a full DNA match, and the case went cold again. In 2002, detectives revived the investigation, enlisting the expertise of forensic scientist Catherine Long, a pioneer in DNA research. She and her team aimed to determine whether a perpetrator's DNA could linger on the victim's body after strangulation, and if so, whether it could be extracted for analysis. To test this theory, Catherine and her colleagues simulated strangulation, squeezing each other's necks, and then collected samples from their hands and the neck area. The results were striking. Even brief contact left behind sufficient skin particles for DNA analysis. Detectives re-examined Kathy's case, focusing on the lamp cord used to bind her hands. Since only the killer could have tightened it, they handed it over to Catherine for DNA analysis. Stored in a paper bag, the cord was swabbed from end to end, including blood-stained areas. 2 DNA profiles emerged, Kathy's and Greg's, providing strong evidence that Greg was the killer. 15 years after the murder, the suspect was arrested and denied involvement, claiming a romantic relationship with Kathy. However, DNA evidence led to his trial. While in prison, his cellmate reported that Greg confessed to the crime, boasting about killing Kathy after she resisted his advances and threatening to harm her son if she didn't comply. The detectives were convinced of the cellmate's veracity, given that he couldn't have possibly divined so many crucial details, even if he had carefully read about the case in the news. Empowered by the cellmate's testimony, the detectives confronted Greg, and this time, he finally broke down and confessed. He acknowledged his guilt in Kathy's murder, repeating the same admission he had made to his cellmate. Subsequently, he pleaded guilty in court and was handed a 45-year prison sentence, though he ultimately served only 4 years before succumbing to liver cancer at the age of 56. Kathy's husband, Mike, tragically didn't live to see the day of the killer's arrest, passing away at the age of 45. Her children and parents expressed gratitude to the detectives for finally bringing the case to a close, albeit 15 years later. Throughout that long and arduous wait, they had been almost certain that Greg was the perpetrator, yet they were forced to watch him continue living with their second daughter, powerless to channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Athena Strand. Athena Strand was born on May 25, 2015, in Duncan, Oklahoma, a small American town. Following her parents' divorce, her father relocated to Texas, while Athena remained with her mother in Oklahoma. Despite the distance, her father maintained regular contact, visiting her frequently, and her mother also made sure Athena spent quality time with him, given their amicable relationship. Later, both her parents remarried, and Athena gained two younger sisters, with whom she shared a strong bond, always seeking to spend as much time with them as possible. Athena was a cheerful child, always exuding positivity, with a passion for outdoor play and exploration. In late 2022, at the age of 7, she temporarily relocated to live with her father in Texas until the New Year holidays, after which she would return to her mother in Oklahoma. During her time in Texas, Athena attended a local elementary school. Her father's rural home, surrounded by woods and fields, provided the perfect setting for her to bond with her dad and his new wife, Elizabeth, in the beauty of nature. On November 30th, Athena returned home from school around 4:15 p.m., just like any other day. With her father and grandfather out hunting, she was left alone with Elizabeth. But that evening, Athena's mood was off, leading to an argument with Elizabeth. Upset, Athena retreated to her room, while Elizabeth headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. 20 minutes later, Elizabeth went to call Athena for dinner, but she was nowhere to be found. Elizabeth searched the entire house and yard, but there was no sign of the girl. She then called her husband's relatives who lived nearby, but they claimed they hadn't seen Athena. Elizabeth then called her husband, explaining the situation, and he immediately told her to contact the police and rushed home. At 6:40, Elizabeth dialed 911, and officers arrived within 14 minutes. She recounted the events and shared her theory that Athena might have run away due to their argument. However, the girl's relatives remained skeptical, given Athena's age of 7 and her history of never straying far from home, especially at night when she was afraid of the dark. Initially, the police viewed Elizabeth with skepticism, primarily due to the 40-minute delay in reporting her child missing after realizing she was gone. However, after listening to her detailed account of searching the entire house and contacting relatives, they concluded that she was likely telling the truth. The officers promptly launched a search of the surrounding area, undeterred by the darkness, and meticulously combed through the forests and fields within a several-kilometer radius of the house. They focused their search on the area around the house, thinking Athena might have wandered off and got lost in the darkness, based on their main theory. While they also looked into the possibility of her being abducted, they didn't find any evidence to support this, since there was no sign of forced entry. Elizabeth didn't report hearing any noises or screams, and the neighbors didn't see anything suspicious that evening. Athena's relatives and concerned townspeople assisted the police in their search efforts. As soon as Athena's mother heard about her daughter's disappearance, she rushed to the scene. The search continued until almost 5 a.m., but they failed to find any signs of Athena. The area around the house, especially during dark hours, was difficult to access, which complicated the search. At 7 a.m., the police resumed their search, this time with more officers. As news of Athena's disappearance spread throughout the county, hundreds of volunteers joined the effort. Some volunteers searched the area on horseback and ATVs, while the police used drones and helicopters equipped with thermal cameras. Despite their efforts, Athena remained missing by the end of the day. The police were increasingly concerned for her life, given the onset of winter and the 50 degrees Fahrenheit temperature in Texas, which would have been challenging for Athena, who was wearing light clothing. On the third day, the police broadened their search to a radius of miles around the house, suspecting a potential criminal element in Athena's disappearance. Despite initial doubts that she had wandered off, they grew more convinced that she hadn't left the house voluntarily. Over the next few days, they scoured the surrounding area in all directions, covering several miles, but found no trace of the girl, as it seemed unlikely she could have walked that far without encountering anyone. Investigators sought to identify those near Athena's house that evening, a challenge due to the secluded location. However, they soon got a break, A courier service had delivered a package that same evening. FedEx led them to the responsible organization and the specific van, which was equipped with cameras, providing key surveillance footage. After rewinding the footage to the time when the van arrived at the house, investigators uncovered disturbing evidence. The footage showed the driver, later identified as 31-year-old Tanner Horner, pulling a girl who looked like Athena into the vehicle. The police promptly apprehended Tanner at his address on suspicion of abduction and took him in for questioning. Tanner confessed to delivering a package to Athena's house that evening. He hit her with his van while backing up, but she was conscious and uninjured. Athena told him her name, and they conversed. Panicked, Tanner put her in his van, unsure what to do. When Athena said she'd tell her father, Tanner's anxiety grew, fearing legal consequences if she told adults about the accident. After that, Tanner's bizarre confession left the investigators perplexed. He claimed that, in his words, killing her seemed the only viable option. First, he attempted to break her neck, but it didn't work, so he resorted to strangling her. Then, he transported her body to a nearby river and discarded it in the water. The police were naturally skeptical of this account, but Tanner provided them with the exact location where he had left Athena's body. They immediately went to the site and indeed found her remains. The news of the young girl's brutal murder sent shockwaves throughout the country, leaving her relatives and thousands of others stunned. As the case garnered widespread media attention, the public was horrified by the sheer cruelty of the crime. After the body was found, Tanner was charged with abduction and murder. As detectives awaited the medical examiner's report, they delved deeper into the criminal's identity, seeking to understand his motives. Tanner's version of events seemed utterly far-fetched. He claimed to have lightly struck the girl with his van, causing no serious harm. Yet, he was allegedly so terrified that he immediately decided to kill her, fearing that hitting a child without causing harm might only lead to his job loss. His story appeared highly improbable. Tanner, engaged with a year-old child, worked as an Uber driver and musician, performing in Fort Worth cafes. His social media showed a normal life, with photos of his child and musical performances. With no prior legal issues, there was no indication he was capable of cruel violence. 2 months prior to Athena's tragic death, the delivery man had shared photos on social media, showcasing heartwarming moments spent with his son and grandparents. The wait for the medical examiner's report, which was anticipated to clarify the exact sequence of events, dragged on for several weeks. During this time, Athena's grief-stricken parents took legal action against FedEx and the contracting company, alleging that they had failed to implement adequate employee screening measures, hence allowing Horner to continue working and paving the way for such a heinous crime. A devastating twist in this tragic tale emerged. The package Horner had delivered on that fateful evening was, in fact, a Christmas gift for Athena, a Barbie doll she had long coveted, which her parents had ordered for her. As the medical examiner's findings were made public, even more questions surfaced in the case. According to the document, the victim's death occurred within an hour of her abduction, with her body showing injuries of varying severity. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Initially, detectives believed that the killer, Horner, had abducted the girl to sexually assault her after spotting her near the house. However, medical experts found no evidence to support this theory, which puzzled the police. The detectives didn't believe the killer's account of events, as it lacked a logical explanation. They speculated that the perpetrator's initial plan was to sexually assault the girl, but something went awry. One theory is that after arguing with her father's wife, the victim went outside and was in the yard when Horner arrived to deliver a package. Noticing the girl alone and isolated, he saw an opportunity to act on his depraved fantasies. Horner could have lured the girl into his van through deception or attacked her to put her in the vehicle without a struggle. What happened next is unclear, with two main theories emerging. It's possible that Horner had planned to abduct the girl and take her far away from the house to commit his intended crimes. However, she may have started screaming or tried to escape, fearing capture, which led him to kill her. Afterwards, he dumped her body in the river. According to an alternative scenario, Horner might have engaged in inappropriate behavior towards the victim without physically touching her. In this case, a medical examination would not have revealed any evidence of sexual assault. The detectives stumbled upon an unexpected clue suggesting a sexual motive behind the crime. What was unusual about Horner was that he had no prior criminal record, which is rare in most cases. Typically, people who are capable of murder start with less severe crimes. The detective spent weeks meticulously investigating Horner's past, speaking to his relatives, friends, and acquaintances to uncover any hints of potential involvement in other crimes. Eventually, they made a breakthrough. The police identified several individuals who alleged they were victimized by Horner during their childhood. To protect the investigation, the authorities did not release the victims' identities or disclose full details of the incidents. However, it is known that one of the victims accused Horner of assaulting her 9 years prior. Additionally, he was charged with 3 counts of sexual assault involving minors in 2013, although it is unclear whether these incidents involved one or multiple victims. One of Horner's victims had been publicly sharing her story for years, describing how he assaulted her when she was 16. She used social media to raise awareness about Horner's criminal nature, but despite this, he faced no consequences and was not considered a suspect. The victim stated that for years, nobody believed her allegations. However, after Horner killed Athena, these allegations gained significant attention, revealing Horner's true character and possible motives. Horner faces multiple trials, including Athena's murder. A disturbing TikTok video shows him watching a bug being killed with a spray, his face showing an unsettling pleasure. This hints at sadistic tendencies, making his account of Athena's murder even more suspicious. Horner claimed he killed Athena to avoid punishment for a lesser crime, but this excuse seems absurd given his sadistic nature. Authorities are seeking the death penalty, backed by video footage and Horner's own testimony. His guilt is clear, and additional evidence may be presented during the trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Varka Rani. In 2012, Jasveer Ram Ginde, a 29-year-old banker, lived in Wawal Town, England, while his parents resided in India. They would frequently call him, urging him to get married since he had reached a marriageable age. Jasveer, however, would consistently ignore their requests until he finally relented in 2012. His parents were overjoyed by his decision and immediately started searching for a suitable bride for their son. In October 2012, Jasveer visited India and reunited with his parents after many years. They showed him photographs of several potential brides, but he didn't find any of them appealing. A relative then suggested a girl named Varka Rani, whom they had discovered on a matrimonial website. Jasveer's parents were impressed by her profile and showed it to their son. Jasveer was immediately drawn to her picture, and his parents subsequently contacted Varka's parents to arrange a meeting between the two families. During this meeting, Varka and Jasveer were introduced to each other, and after conversing for a while, they found themselves compatible. Talks of their marriage began, and a wedding date was eventually set. Let's take a step back and learn about Varka's background. Varka Rani, who lived in Marbagh Singh Nagar, Punjab, was 24 years old when Jasveer, 29, came into her life. After graduating, Varka pursued a degree in information technology and had a passion for studying, earning degrees in 4 different courses at a young age. She was the apple of her family's eye. As she approached a suitable age for marriage, her family, with her consent, created a profile for her on a matrimonial site. Through this platform, Varka found her life partner, and Jasveer planned to take her to England after their wedding. Varka's family was overjoyed, knowing that her academic achievements would make it easy for her to find a job in England as well. On March 28, 2013, Jasveer and Varka tied the knot in a traditional Indian wedding, which was a lavish affair with around 700 guests in attendance. However, shortly after the celebration, Jasveer had to return to England, while Varka's visa was still pending approval. During this period, Varka applied for an England visa, but Jasveer had already reached England. Meanwhile, Varka was eagerly waiting for her visa in India. Eventually, her wait ended, and in July, she booked a ticket to join her husband in England. Finally, on August 10, 2013, Varka arrived in England, reuniting with Jasveer. In the vicinity of Jasveer's house, there was a crematorium where the dead were cremated. The pungent smell of burning human flesh would often spread through the air when someone's funeral rites were performed, causing discomfort to Jasveer and those around him for a few hours. Now, it was September 12, 2013, and Varka had been in England for about a month. On that night, smoke began billowing from Jasveer and Varka's house, alarming their neighbors. To investigate the source of the smoke, 2 or 3 neighbors visited Jasveer's house. When they rang the doorbell, Jasveer initially didn't respond. However, when he eventually opened the door, one of the neighbors asked what was causing the smoke and smell of burning flesh in his house so late at night. In reality, no human cremation had taken place at the crematorium that day. In response, Jasveer explained that they had cleaned their house that day, accumulated some garbage, and were just burning it in the furnace, which might have been causing the smell. Hearing this, the neighbors went back to their homes, but after some time, a very strong smell started emanating again from Jasveer's house. Because of this, it became difficult for the neighbors to breathe, so one of them called the police to complain. A few minutes later, the police arrived at Jasveer's house, responding to reports from neighbors about a strange smell emanating from the residence. Jasveer provided the same evasive answers to the police's inquiries as he had to his neighbors. The police then conducted a search of Jasveer's house, discovering a 22-inch furnace in which he was burning household trash. Following their inspection, the police departed, but Jasveer subsequently went to the police station to file a complaint against his wife. In his statement, he alleged that Varka had deceived him, marrying him only to secure a pathway to England from India. According to Jasveer, the two had argued that morning, and in the evening, Varka had taken $500 and left his house. After hearing Jasveer's story, the police assured him that they would find Varka soon. Following up on his complaint, Jasveer returned home and promptly called his parents in India, recounting the entire ordeal. By the next morning, Jasveer's parents had also informed Varka's family about Varka's actions. However, on the morning of September 13th, Jasveer again burned the pot inside his house. Smoke billowed out, accompanied by a peculiar and pungent smell. This time, the neighbors found the situation utterly bizarre, prompting them to call the police once more. When the police arrived at Jasveer's house that morning, they told him that his neighbors were distressed due to his actions. The overpowering smell compelled the police to investigate its source, and they attempted to enter Jasveer's house. Without hesitation, Jasveer guided the police to his garden. The police conducted a thorough search of the entire garden, but yielded nothing. Just as they were about to leave Jasveer's house, a female officer spotted a furnace nearby, still burning with a flickering flame inside. As she removed the lid, she let out a blood-curdling scream, prompting the other officers to converge on the furnace. Inside, the officer had discovered a charred human body, the skin completely incinerated, leaving only skeletal remains. The police wasted no time in arresting Jasveer. A team of forensic experts was subsequently summoned to the scene. The severely burned body made it challenging for even the forensic pathologist to determine its gender. However, a few personal items were recovered from the furnace, including a bracelet, necklace, and ring. Following a meticulous forensic examination of the entire house, the police sequestered some of Jasvir's personal belongings, including his phone, iPad, and notably a wedding album featuring Varka and Jasvir. After meticulous scrutiny of the photos, the police made a startling discovery. Varka was wearing the same jewelry later found in the furnace by the forensic team. This revelation sparked a crucial question: did the remains belong to Varka? With these suspicions in mind, the police turned their attention to Jasvir, grilling him about his wife's whereabouts. Initially, Jasvir feigned ignorance, claiming Varka had deceived him and fled. But when confronted with the incriminating evidence gathered by forensic experts, he became visibly agitated. His story promptly shifted as he attempted to spin a new narrative for the police. Jasvir and Varka got married in March 2013, but he was initially hesitant. He was won over by her charm, and they had a grand celebration. A few months later, Varka moved to England, but then confessed she had only married him to gain independence and move. Jasvir was furious, and their arguments escalated, including a nasty fight on September 12th. Later, when Varka failed to return home at night, Jasvir's worry turned to alarm, prompting him to file a complaint at the police station. However, the police were skeptical of Jasvir's story. They subsequently questioned Jasvir's neighbors and friends, who described Varka as friendly, polite, and well-liked, while Jasvir's friends reluctantly shared disturbing details about his preference for men over women. Undeterred, Jasvir continued to fabricate stories to mislead the police. However, their investigation uncovered incriminating photos on Jasvir's iPad, which revealed a telling aspect of his personality. The police then intensified their interrogation, and Jasvir eventually cracked under the pressure, recounting a vastly different story. Jasvir confessed to the police that he had a violent fight with Varka on September 12th, during which he lost control and choked her with a vacuum cleaner pipe, resulting in her tragic death. He then transported her body to the garden, where a furnace was located, and burned it. However, this wasn't Jasvir's true story. In reality, Jasvir had known he was gay and attracted to men since he was 12. After completing his education in India, he moved to England, where he landed a job at a bank. In 2008, he began a relationship with a gay man and had also confided in some close friends about his sexual orientation. In 2013, Jasvir's family began pressuring him to get married soon. Unwilling to reveal his true identity to his family, Jasvir agreed to marry Varka. After bringing Varka to England, their relationship remained platonic. However, when Varka discovered inappropriate pictures of Jasvir with his gay partner on his iPad, their disagreements turned into arguments, with Varka threatening to expose Jasvir's secret to his family. Jasvir was consumed by rage when he strangled Varka, ultimately leading to her death. In an attempt to dispose of her body, he burned her in the furnace, but the pungent smell of burning flesh alerted the neighbors, who promptly notified the authorities. On the morning of September 13th, Jasvir returned to the furnace, only to find that some remains were still intact, prompting him to douse the body with petrol and set it ablaze once more. However, the putrid smell spread again, and when the police arrived at Jasvir's doorstep for the second time, they apprehended him as the husband who had murdered his new bride upon her discovery of his sexual orientation. Jasvir, a native of Warsaw, brutally killed Varka Rani just a few months into their marriage. The news sent shockwaves through both Jasvir's and Varka's families. Jasvir's family struggled to come to terms with their son's sexuality, while Varka's family was consumed by grief. The evidence against Jasvir was overwhelming, and he was subsequently taken into custody and brought to trial at Wolverhampton Crown Court. Although Jasvir initially attempted to denial and deceive to avoid punishment, he was eventually sentenced to life imprisonment after a grueling 3-month trial. Furthermore, he would be ineligible for parole for at least 20 years. We're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Roxanne Valdez. Roxanne Valdez was born in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile, in 1957. Roxana Valdez was married to a man whose name remains undisclosed or unknown to the press. She had a son with him. It's clear that her marriage wasn't the dream every girl hopes for, as the couple eventually parted ways in 2011. As a single mother in a small village where jobs were scarce, Roxana faced significant challenges. In such communities, the primary occupation was growing and selling fruits and vegetables, and even the local educational institutions focused on agriculture. It was in this setting that Roxana found employment at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. She worked as a night supervisor at the school, ensuring that students slept at night and didn't engage in unruly activities. Her responsibilities didn't include the actual upbringing of the children. Roxana's son attended the same boarding school where she worked. As a single mother, she spent her days working in the fields, leaving her little time to devote to her son. At the school, Claudio Munoz Ramirez was the head of grounds maintenance. His night shifts often brought him into contact with Roxana, despite their 14-year age difference. They discovered common interests and bonded over their personal struggles. Roxana shared stories about the school and her failed marriage, while Claudio confided in her about his unhappy relationship with his wife and his adoration for his two daughters. Though he felt disconnected from his wife and had considered divorce, he remained in the marriage to honor a promise to his late father-in-law. Over time, Claudio's priorities shifted, and he began spending more time with Roxana, eventually leaving his family without explanation. Roxana welcomed him into her life, and their relationship accelerated rapidly. However, in her haste, she overlooked the fact that Claudio was temperamental and sometimes cruel, as well as the needs of her own children, who required constant attention. On a scheduled community cleanup day at the boarding school, Claudio's first serious outburst of aggression occurred. Students were assigned different areas to clean and were given the necessary supplies, including brooms, buckets, dustpans, and rags. However, some students refused to participate, which infuriated Claudio, who was in charge of cleanliness but lacked teaching experience. In the absence of teachers, he threatened to physically harm any student who didn't clean. Although it's unclear if he would have carried out this threat, the students eventually began cleaning. Later, they collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of violence, which displeased the principal. As a result, the principal asked Claudio to resign voluntarily. It's worth noting that the Don Gregorio boarding school was almost the only place in the area that offered stable and reasonably paid employment. Claudio initially spent some time searching for work in fields and at fruit stalls, but when his efforts proved unsuccessful, he and Roxana decided to seek a better life elsewhere. They left her son at the boarding school to continue his education, as they deemed it too risky to take him with them, fearing they would become too dependent on employers. Having already had a bad experience, the couple decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They relocated to the commune of Molina, a couple of hours' drive from the Chilean capital, which is renowned for its vineyards that produce well-known wine brands exported globally. Roxana and Claudio bought a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and took their first steps in their small family business. Claudio was responsible for purchasing and transporting products from suppliers to the kiosk, while Roxana handled sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to hire an employee, as this would have meant additional expenses. And they were also concerned that an employee might not closely monitor the perishable goods, leading to further losses. Claudio was visibly upset and even angry when he found out that Roxana was pregnant with their first child together. He needed time to reflect on this, but Roxana, blinded by her new relationship and their thriving business, didn't disagree with his point of view. She agreed that after the child was born, they would give it to her relatives to raise. However, it turned out that there was no child to give away. Since then, Claudio's behavior changed drastically. he frequently yelled at his wife and occasionally resorted to physical violence. The neighbors, unhappy with the noisy disputes, often called the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene and calm the domestic disputes. On one occasion, the police responded to a distress call to find Roxana in a distraught state, crying and partially undressed, as she fled her home with Claudio chasing after her. When the officers arrived, Roxana broke down and confided in them, revealing that she had been a victim of ongoing domestic abuse, which had even led to her suffering a miscarriage. This traumatic experience had left her requiring psychological help. Nevertheless, as time passed, the couple appeared to put the incident behind them, and they resumed their life together as if the ordeal had never occurred. Despite the incident warranting criminal charges, Roxana showed compassion and gave Claudio a second chance, extracting a promise that it was an isolated incident. Claudio vowed to never again exhibit such behavior, but his history of abuse with his ex-wife cast doubt on his reliability. Sadly, the pattern of abuse persisted, and history repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically abusing Roxana, but started going out at night to drink excessively in local bars. He would spend a significant portion of their family's income not only on alcohol, but also on relationships with disreputable women. Roxana tolerated her husband's behavior, hoping that he would change once they had a child together. Her hope was partially fulfilled. In 2013, Roxana gave birth to a healthy child, and Claudio ended his partying lifestyle, diverting his attention to their business, which required expansion. They acquired another kiosk in a nearby area and an additional vehicle for transporting products. Roxana also invested in firearms for protection, as their work and living environments were not very safe. The family's wealth grew substantially, but it was only on paper. Despite this, Claudio went back to his old habits, wasting money on drinking and once again resorting to violence against Roxana at home. According to Roxana's testimony, the abuse she suffered at Claudio's hands continually worsened over time. At first, Claudio only drank occasionally, but he soon began to do so more and more frequently. When he came home drunk, he would accuse Roxana of being unfaithful, even though she was innocent, and this would lead to physical and sexual abuse, even when she was pregnant. Claudio's actions seemed intentionally designed to cause harm, and they ultimately led to Roxana having a miscarriage in August 2012, which sent her into a deep and prolonged depression. Claudio followed his usual routine by visiting a local bar one night, staying out until the next morning. Roxana, accustomed to his behavior, still worried about him. However, it turned out that Claudio had stolen 5 million Chilean pesos, equivalent to around $6,000, from their daughter's room. The money, earned from selling Roxana's mother's house, was intended for their joint business venture. Roxana was shocked and felt betrayed by Claudio's actions, which he used to fund his excessive drinking and brothel visits. When Claudio finally returned home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. Instead of discussing the issue, Claudio assaulted her and confessed to squandering the entire amount. This was the final straw for Roxana, who, without hesitation, went to their bedroom, retrieved a .38 caliber revolver intended for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest at close range. The shot proved fatal, and Claudio died instantly. Roxana was taken aback by her own drastic actions and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound, but it was too late. Her desperate act marked a tragic end to the ongoing turmoil in their domestic life. In her testimony, Roxana expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the immorality of her actions. She confessed that her intention was to kill Claudio, not intimidate him, citing the numerous instances of abuse and assault she had suffered at his hands. Roxana regretted not reporting these incidents to the authorities or withdrawing her complaint out of fear, even before they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's primary concern was the potential impact on their young daughter, particularly if she were imprisoned and the child were sent to an institution. That night, Roxana decided the best course of action would be to dispose of the body and report Claudio missing. Aware that his frequent drinking binges that often led to his disappearance were well known to the police. Roxana found disposing of the body a daunting task. She decided to dismember it piece by piece, initially using 5 kitchen knives intended for meat cutting to sever the limbs and head as they kept dulling. She then boiled the dismembered parts in her largest pots, all while interacting with her young daughter, who remained oblivious to her mother's actions and her father's fate. The following day, Roxana packed the cooled body parts into plastic containers, organizing them separately: hands, legs, head, and torso. Each container was then placed in a separate garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia, intending to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she thoroughly cleaned her house with bleach. However, upon arriving at the designated site, Roxana couldn't muster the courage to dispose of the bags, despite finding a suitable location. In her testimony, Roxana expressed her internal conflict, stating that it was strange she had the bravery to commit the heinous crime and dismember a human body as if it were an animal. But she couldn't bring herself to dispose of the evidence. She mentioned being nervous throughout the drive, feeling constantly watched, fearing the police would stop and search her car at any moment. This fear led to panic, even though she had a backup plan involving her daughter, pretending to rush her to the hospital if stopped. She even thought of how to make her cry louder by pinching her. Roxana was unable to get rid of the remains, so she took them back home and hid them in the garage. She then thoroughly cleaned the interior of her car with bleach. Next, she visited Claudio's relatives, telling them that he had stolen a large amount of money and had been absent for days. They didn't seem to care, simply shrugging in response. After that, Roxana visited her mother and brother. Her mother was extremely concerned about Roxana's behavior, noticing that she hadn't eaten, had a glazed expression, and kept asking the same questions over and over. The only question Roxana answered quickly was when her mother asked about Claudio's whereabouts, saying that he had gone to buy supplies for their store, but had gotten a flat tire and was delayed getting back home. Alone with her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down and called her brother for help. When he arrived, she confessed everything, sharing the nightmarish years she endured with Claudio, and showed him the containers holding the body. Her brother was shocked, but instead of offering help, he refused, fearing police involvement and the possibility of being charged as an accomplice. He urged Roxana to confess to the Carabineros, insisting he would do it if she didn't. Disappointed but realizing she had no other choice, Roxana decided to take his advice. That night, she went to the 4th police station, announcing her intention to make an important statement. The officers, familiar with her husband's troublesome behavior, initially thought she wanted to report him again. However, they were shocked by her confession. Roxana was immediately arrested, and the news spread rapidly throughout the area, attracting a swarm of journalists around the station. The case against Roxana seemed clear-cut. She had confessed to the crime, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. However, prosecutor Monica Bissos was not convinced. She was skeptical about the ease with which Roxana had confessed and wanted to investigate further. Bissos requested an extension of Roxana's arrest to conduct a forensic examination, hoping to prove that her victim, Claudio, was still alive when she dismembered him. This would have significantly increased Roxana's sentence. The judge agreed to a 60-day detention for further investigation. Meanwhile, Roxana's defense attorney, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxana had acted while under extreme emotional distress, possibly exacerbated by postpartum depression and chronic domestic abuse. She pointed out that Roxana's cooperation and voluntary confession should be considered mitigating factors. However, the prosecution's theory that Claudio was alive during the dismemberment was later disproven by forensic results, which confirmed that Claudio had died from a gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet from the .38 caliber revolver had caused a heart rupture and damaged vital organs. Following these developments, the aggravating circumstances were dismissed. In a separate development, lawyer Juan Pablo Cardenas, who was seeking to make a name for himself in this high-profile case, noted that the firearm used in the murder was legally registered. He also pointed out that Roxana's first report of domestic violence to the police was filed just 20 days after the couple started living together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela submitted documents to the court after a medical examination stating that Roxana was extremely mentally unstable at the time of the crime. According to his findings, she lacked full awareness of her actions and suffered from emotional instability, which was linked to the recent loss of 2 children, one in August 2012 and another just 3 weeks before the crime. Prosecutors' forensic exam showed Claudio's blood alcohol level was 3 Gr/L at death on April 17, 2015. After a year of investigation, Roxana's trial began. The media dubbed it the Melina Cooks case and sensationalized it, claiming Roxana ate part of the remains to attract attention. Distressed, Roxana refused to make statements during the trial. The prosecutors attempted to sway the judge's opinion by highlighting that, according to Chilean law, Roxana had committed a serious offense, the murder of her own father, patricide, although they failed to provide evidence that the crime was premeditated. In contrast, the defense attorney countered that his client had acted in self-defense, protecting herself from a violent aggressor who had subjected her to years of abuse and mistreatment. The trial, which lasted several weeks, was closely followed by the entire population of Chile. Prosecutor Monica requested a 15-year prison sentence for Roxana, but after careful consideration of the defense and the jury's opinion, the judges sentenced her to 6 years in a correctional facility with a lenient regime. Claudio's relatives, who had been hoping for a life sentence or even the death penalty, were outraged when they heard the prosecutor's request for only 15 years. They were devastated by the court's decision and rejected any suggestion of violence within the family. They argued that Claudio, a successful businessman, could not have stolen $6,000 from Roxana, and claimed that he had confessed to them that Roxana had often threatened to kill him, having previously taken out a revolver from the closet and warned him of her intentions. Claudio's sister blamed Chile's system of justice, claiming it to be corrupt, as evidenced by the short sentences given to brutal criminals, similar to those for minor robberies. Claudio's first wife, Giselle, defended him, asserting that he was not violent, based on her experience of living with him for many years without incident. In contrast, Roxana was prone to jealous outbursts and possessiveness, often sparking disputes. Roxana's sentence was shortened due to good behavior, and she was transferred to a semi-open education center, where she was allowed to communicate with her daughter. Eventually, she was released early, sparking widespread outrage among the public, who felt that the cook from Melina was let off lightly. However, some people saw Roxana as a victim and justified her actions, despite considering her a murderer. This case continues to be debated in the country, highlighting the severe consequences of unchecked domestic violence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Liana Friedenbach. Liana Friedenbach and Felipe Café, the young people involved in this tragedy, came from different backgrounds. Liana, born in May 1987 in São Paulo, was the elder of 2 children in a wealthy and respected family. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, was a successful lawyer and a well-known figure in the city. Felipe Silva Café, also from São Paulo, was born in July 1984, but grew up in a large, modest family. From a young age, he worked part-time to support himself and help his family. They met at school and developed a strong friendship that blossomed into romance. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. Liana's parents, who were strict and religious, had brought her up to attend Sunday school and church regularly and were opposed to her dating at such a young age. Social inequality also contributed significantly to the situation, as she came from a wealthy family while her partner was from a poor background. However, the parents' prohibitions did not deter the young lovers from staying together. Instead, they started secretly dating in various locations where they would not be seen, just to spend some time together. In the fall of 2003, the lovers decided to take a trip to a secluded area to be alone for a while. They carefully planned the trip, which was meant to be an exciting adventure for them. They came up with a believable alibi to justify their absence and avoid arousing suspicion. Felipe told his parents that he and his friends were going on a camping trip. Liana, on the other hand, told her parents that she was going on a sightseeing trip with some guys from church, knowing that they would not question her further. The Friedenbach and Cafe families believed the fabricated stories and let their children go without any concerns. Liana and Felipe were overjoyed that they could spend a whole week together, free from their parents' scrutiny and judgment. The young couple decided to visit the picturesque province of Iguazu. They packed lightly, bringing a tent, sleeping bags, some personal items, and a small supply of food. However, they faced a significant challenge. They had hardly any money. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they planned their route in advance to reach their destination by bus. On the morning of October 31st, the lovers met at the agreed meeting point, careful not to be seen by anyone who knew them. They caught the first bus and, after arriving in another city in the evening, spent the night at the bus station. 2 more bus rides took them to their desired location. From there, they had to walk a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the woods where they planned to camp and spend a few days alone together. Despite their fatigue after the long journey, the warm and sunny day put them in high spirits, and they joked, laughed, and made plans for their mini vacation. Once they reached the spot marked on their map, they began setting up their modest but cozy camp. Liana and Felipe's plans were ruined by unwelcome visitors. When they traveled to a remote and secluded area, they didn't consider that poverty and crime often thrive in such places. Their arrival didn't go unnoticed, especially since they were well-dressed and carrying large backpacks and bags as they walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay. They caught the attention of local bandits, Paulo Cesar de Silva Marquez, nicknamed Perran Buku, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chino, who was only 16 but already led the gang. The bandits were interested in the strangers, particularly the beautiful young girl. They decided that the backpacks likely contained valuables and could be robbed. The bandits secretly followed the couple and watched from the underbrush. Liana and Felipe set up their tent, had a snack, and began to clean up their campsite. The bandits waited in ambush until they were certain no one else would join the couple and that they didn't have any weapons. Perran Buku and Chino then attacked Liana and Felipe, threatening them, and Felipe, frightened, didn't even try to run away or fight back against the unknown attackers. Having thoroughly searched all the bags and backpacks, the criminals found nothing of value. They then decided to demand a ransom from the boys' and girls' relatives. Liana, terrified, quickly revealed that she came from a wealthy family and her father would pay them any amount they demanded. The criminals were thrilled with this development, but lacking experience in such cases, they were unsure how to proceed to get the money and release the prisoners. As they refined their plan, the bandits tried to determine the value of their captives and the ransom they could demand. To prevent escape, they decided to hide the prisoners. Initially, they were taken to a rundown structure near the farm where they were staying, but it lacked windows and doors. Later, they were moved to the home of one of the gang members. There, Felipe was tied up and brutally beaten to prevent escape and resistance. That night, the gang members took turns abusing the bound and helpless Liana, ultimately breaking her spirit. The kidnappers were unable to figure out how to demand and collect a ransom, so they decided to kill the captives and hide their bodies in the woods, making it unlikely they would ever be found. After torturing the kidnappers took them to a remote area in the woods the following day. Pernambuco took the badly beaten Felipe deep into the forest, where a gunshot was heard, and then he returned alone. Liana realized what had happened and that her loved one was dead. Although the kidnappers tried to convince Liana that they had released Felipe, they had other sinister plans in mind for her. They intended to keep her captive as their plaything until they grew tired of her, especially since no one had begun searching for the missing boys at that time. A couple of days after Liana left, her parents discovered that there was no church excursion trip, and her friends were unaware of her whereabouts. The Friedenbach family suspected that Liana had run off with her boyfriend, Felipe, and immediately contacted his parents. However, Felipe's family believed he had gone camping with friends, so they couldn't assist in locating the couple. The situation was complicated by the fact that neither Liana nor Felipe had been in contact for several days, and their phones were turned off. Thanks to the Friedenbach family's connections and resources, they were able to mobilize the entire city's police force to track the couple's trail, step by step. Through trickery, they managed to reconstruct the route the young people took after running away from home. The police arrived at Embu Guasu, where the last bus had dropped them off, and from there they had to navigate through a deserted wooded area on foot. This was also the last location where their phones were still online. A massive search operation was launched, involving police officers, rescuers, and concerned citizens who had learned about the incident and wanted to help. A local businessman even offered his personal helicopter to aid in the search effort and distributed flyers with photos of the missing pair. The search party quickly found the couple's camp, but what they saw was chilling. Although there were no signs of bloodshed or struggle, it was clear that something horrific had taken place. The contents of their bags had been emptied and scattered about. Their tent had been sliced open from top to bottom with a knife, and the guys' phones were lying nearby. As the rescuers combed through the area, they soon stumbled upon Philippe's lifeless body. The young man had been shot in the back of the head at close range, and it was clear that he had never stood a chance. Although the chances of finding Liana alive were now extremely low, the searchers held on to hope, however slim. Henry Friedenbach actively sought the help of the press to widely publicize the search for Liana, ensuring that as many people as possible were aware of the situation. A substantial reward was offered for any information about her whereabouts, although unfortunately, this did not lead to a breakthrough in the case. Once the criminals had disposed of Felipe, they returned Liana to the same house where they had previously held both her and Felipe captive. By this time, the group of criminals had been joined by their accomplices, Antonio Gano da Silva and Agnaldo Pius Chino. Agnaldo, in particular, callously declared that Liana was now his property and that he had the freedom to do with her as he pleased. He then shockingly invited the others to indulge in their darkest desires with Liana, an invitation that was quickly accepted by the group. A day after the large-scale search operation began, the criminals relocated with their captive Liana to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, another gang member. That evening, they took Liana with them when they went fishing. The ringleader showed a pretense of concern by putting his jacket over her due to the chilly weather. Later that evening, Chino's older brother, who was unaware of his siblings' illegal activities, arrived at the same location. Chino introduced Liana to his brother as his girlfriend, but the brother immediately recognized her as the girl the police were searching for. The brother took Chino aside and warned him that the police were closing in on them. Chino saw this as a warning and decided it was time to eliminate Liana and flee. He deceived Liana by telling her she was free to go and he would escort her to the road. However, he actually led her into the forest where he brutally stabbed her to death with a knife and then crushed her skull with a rock to ensure she was dead. Liana's body was discovered 5 days after the massacre, with no signs of life and severe mutilation. The key piece of evidence was the killer's jacket, which Liana was wearing. The perpetrators were not only cruel, cynical, and ruthless, but also incredibly stupid and short-sighted. Despite their brutality, they did not attempt to flee, hide, or destroy the physical evidence, believing they would never be caught. This overconfidence ultimately led to their quick identification and apprehension by the police. The ringleader, Chino, made a crucial mistake by leaving his jacket on Liana's body, which retained his sweat marks. He then took the murder weapon to his house, washing it and hiding it in the yard. He also tried to wash his blood-stained clothes so he could continue wearing them. However, DNA analysis ultimately linked the gang members to the crime, allowing the police to apprehend them almost simultaneously. The ringleader did not deny his involvement in the crime and instead chose to testify, bragging about kidnapping, abusing, and ultimately killing the victim, Liana. He provided a detailed account of her final days. Following a lengthy trial, most adult members of the criminal gang received severe sentences. However, the ringleader, Chino, was only 16 at the time of the crimes, so he was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a relatively lenient regime. During his incarceration, Chino made multiple escape attempts and exhibited aggressive and inappropriate behavior, which led to a psychiatric evaluation. The examination revealed several mental abnormalities, which cumulatively turned him into a calculating sadist and murderer devoid of pity or remorse. Chino, responsible for the murder of young men, was sent to a secure medical facility for mandatory treatment and rehabilitation despite the family's numerous appeals. His living conditions are now comfortable, with a private room featuring a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He receives 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, and his monthly maintenance costs around approximately $2,500. In recent years, Chino has repeatedly requested his release, arguing that he has completed his treatment and no longer poses a threat to anyone, allowing him to resume his normal life. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sabrina Kuiter. Sabrina Kuiter was born on December 5, 1982, in a London suburb to parents of French and Algerian descent, giving her a unique cultural heritage. This blend of influences likely contributed to her striking features and fiery personality. As the eldest of 4 children, Sabrina was cherished by her family and often held up as a model for her siblings. At the age of 2, her family moved to Paris, France, where she spent most of her childhood and adolescence. However, during her school years, Sabrina's complex and difficult personality began to emerge. Former classmates have described her as arrogant, domineering, self-absorbed, and extremely selfish. She had few friends, either at school or in her neighborhood, as she believed she was superior to those around her. Sabrina was particularly hostile towards bright and outgoing girls, viewing them as rivals and enemies. Despite her stunning physical appearance, she was a striking brunette with brown eyes and an impressive figure. Sabrina's inability to form genuine connections with others held her back from pursuing a career in modeling, where her looks could have taken her far. Instead, she often sought to manipulate those around her. As a child, Sabrina showed promise in sports and had some interest in music, but her lack of persistence and inconsistent effort hindered her from achieving success in either area. Later, Sabrina alleged that she was mistreated by her maternal relatives in France during her childhood, but these claims were never confirmed. In contrast, her family maintained that they spoiled her and that she always sought attention. During her teenage years, Sabrina's athletic ambitions were prematurely halted by a back injury, which in turn led to her dependence on prescription painkillers. In an attempt to obtain these drugs illegally, she was arrested and received a warning from the police. Sabrina was extremely self-absorbed, constantly craving attention and admiration for her appearance. She firmly believed that her future would be filled with luxury, glamour, and interactions with celebrities, and was even convinced she was born to be a star. At times, her fantasies became so vivid that they distorted her perception of reality, making her believe she belonged in the Hollywood elite. Sabrina holds a degree in English and French literature from the Sorbonne, but since 2006, she has falsely claimed to work in various roles in the fashion industry, such as stylist, makeup artist, fashion designer, or designer, despite lacking actual expertise. Sabrina, known for her stunning looks, has a history of captivating men and exploiting their affection. However, she never considered any of her suitors worthy of a serious relationship, waiting instead for a submissive partner who would obey her every command. After completing her education, Sabrina remained unclear about her life goals, feeling entitled to everything without putting in effort. Nevertheless, she enrolled at the prestigious Sorbonne University and simultaneously worked at a sweet shop to support herself financially. It was there, at the age of 18, that she met Wissem Medouni. Medouni, 6 years her senior, was a manager at a major French company's head office and a graduate of one of Paris's most prestigious universities. He aspired to earn a master's degree to advance his career, despite not being particularly handsome or part of elite social circles. He fell deeply in love with Sabrina and was willing to fulfill all her desires. Sabrina, in turn, found Medouni appealing, seeing him as someone she could manipulate and as a ticket to a wealthy lifestyle. She was drawn to his ambition and capacity for career success, as well as his willingness to pamper and spoil her. The couple began dating in 2000 and moved in together within a few months. Sabrina's true nature was soon exposed as she attempted to control Medouni in every way possible. When her demands were not met, she would throw tantrums, manipulate others, and even resort to physical violence. Moreover, she began to openly cheat on Medouni, not even trying to hide her infidelity or justify her actions. She would engage in flings with anyone, from casual acquaintances to Medouni's closest friends or colleagues. Despite Medouni's numerous attempts to end the relationship and leave her, he always found himself returning to her, unable to break free from his deep love for Sabrina. In 2001, Medouni achieved his master's degree and a significant promotion, resulting in a substantial increase in income. He spent lavishly on Sabrina's luxurious clothing and entertainment. As his family owned several properties in Paris, he managed them and handed over all the rental income to Sabrina. Medouni, who shared Franco-Algerian roots with Sabrina, saw her as a kindred spirit. According to reports, in the fall of 2001, they had a Muslim ceremony, which was documented by a certificate from the Argento Mosque. However, this religious ceremony was not enough to make their union official and legal. The couple had a son, whose paternity Medouni officially recognized. Years later, however, a Frenchman named Anthony Francois claimed to be the child's biological father. Francois, who would later testify in Sabrina's trial, described her as volatile, unpredictable, promiscuous, and manipulative. In 2008, the global financial crisis led to Wissem Medouni losing his high-paying job when the company he worked for went bankrupt. Around the same time, Sabrina Kuyder became fixated on moving to London, and she made the decision to relocate without fully consulting Medouni. With little choice, Medouni followed her to London, where he found work at a major English bank. However, Sabrina struggled to establish herself in the fashion industry due to her lack of skills, experience, and formal education. Over time, she had to lower her expectations and took on various jobs, including working as a nanny, in a call center, at a cafe, and even attempting network marketing. Sabrina's pursuit of love and success took an unexpected turn when she revived her teenage passion for music and added musician and composer to her credentials. Despite her enthusiasm, Sabrina faced challenges finding professional opportunities in the music industry. She attended numerous auditions and social events, hoping to make valuable connections. Sabrina met Mark Walton, a famous musician and songwriter, at an event. Mark was one of the founding members of Boyzone, a well-known Irish boy band. After leaving the group, he became a successful producer and music mogul, working with artists like Jennifer Lopez, Jessica Simpson, and Lady Gaga. By 2016, his net worth had exceeded $1 billion. To Sabrina, Mark was the perfect person to meet, her key to a world of fame and luxury. She impressed Mark with her beauty and charisma, and he fell in love with her at first sight. As their relationship progressed quickly, Sabrina made an effort to be pleasant and endearing, eventually ending her relationship with Maduni as she saw a promising future with Mark. Mark's previous relationship and child didn't deter Sabrina, and soon the couple moved in together, living in a luxurious house in an upscale London area. Mark covered all the expenses, including the rent for the lavish house Sabrina had chosen. For several months, Sabrina lived the luxurious life she had always dreamed of, socializing with celebrities, attending elite events, wearing designer clothing, and even appearing in glossy magazines. Sabrina found it difficult to manage Mark because she was afraid of losing him. Her inability to control her nature eventually led to jealousy towards every woman around Mark. Over time, Sabrina's demands grew, and she began to crave more gifts and luxury. Mark tried to please her by showering her with designer clothes, jewelry, and taking her to upscale restaurants and clubs, but no matter what he did, it was never enough to satisfy her. Sabrina's home had a revolving door of staff and nannies due to her growing paranoia. She suspected them of theft or trying to seduce Mark, which led to a high turnover rate. Her irrational behavior pushed Mark to the edge, and in 2011, he ended their relationship and moved to California, leaving Sabrina with nothing. When Mark left, Sabrina lost the luxurious lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. In an attempt to win him back, she started giving interviews accusing Mark of being violent and abusive. She would call him, crying and begging him to return, even threatening to take her own life, but none of these tactics worked. Realizing she had lost Mark, Sabrina reached out to her ex-partner, Wissam Maduni, whose career was thriving as a bank executive. He forgave her and took her back, still harboring feelings for her. They resumed living together, and soon after reuniting, Sabrina discovered she was pregnant. Sabrina informed Walton, who, through his lawyers, offered to provide for the child and her, offering a monthly allowance. However, Walton requested a paternity test after the child's birth to confirm he was the father. Sabrina's refusal to undergo the test hinted at her uncertainty about the child's paternity, which could have secured her substantial regular payments. Instead of accepting the proposed allowance, Sabrina demanded that Walton double the amount. When Walton refused, she launched a campaign against him. Taking to social media, Sabrina made false accusations that Walton was obsessed with her, extremely jealous of Maduni, and had even threatened them physically. She claimed that Walton had broken into their home, assaulted Maduni, traumatized their children, and sexually assaulted her in violent ways. However, her allegations were unfounded, as Walton had a solid alibi, having been in the United States since their breakup. After Walton sued her for defamation and the police threatened to take action, Sabrina stopped making accusations against her ex-boyfriend. Sabrina settled in Ossembledon, southwest London, with Maduni and their 2 children, and it seemed as though the conflict had been resolved. However, Sabrina, who was not accustomed to managing household chores and found it challenging to care for 2 children, decided to hire a nanny who could also help with the housework. She posted an online job advertisement and conducted personal interviews, but most candidates did not meet her expectations, and those who did not stay long in her household. A young French woman, Sophie Léon, responded to the job advertisement. Because Sophie was in her hometown in France at the time, the interview was conducted via video call. The 19-year-old modestly agreed to all the terms, taking care of a child, helping with household chores, and cooking, in exchange for a symbolic weekly wage of £50, including full board and lodging with her future employer. Born on January 7, 1996 in Troyes, a small town between Oise and Sens, Sophie grew up in a humble family. Her parents, Catherine and Patrick Léon, were ordinary workers struggling to make ends meet. After completing her education, Sophie earned a diploma in childcare, but she didn't want to work in her hometown. Instead, she dreamed of moving to a big city. Known for her kind and open-hearted nature, Sophie was loved by those who knew her. She was shy, quiet, and plain in appearance, and wore glasses due to poor vision, which made her a bit self-conscious. During their conversation, Sabrina identified Sophie, who seemed ordinary and unremarkable, as the perfect person to manipulate. Sophie was keen to gain experience and good references, so she was willing to work for very little money. To Sophie, Sabrina appeared to be a serious and trustworthy employer, which she mentioned to her parents before leaving for London. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly for Sophie Leonette, who innocently believed that working for the Kuyders would be a great way to start her nanny career. She quickly formed a close bond with the children, completed her household chores as specified in her contract, and had sufficient time and resources to improve her English language skills and explore the city's attractions. This peaceful period lasted for several months, and all appeared to be going well. Problems arose when Maduni lost his job, leaving the family with only one stable source of income: the monthly child support payments from Walton. Sabrina then demanded that Walton increase these payments, but he requested a DNA test to confirm his paternity first. As a result, the family struggled financially, finding it hard to afford their rent and basic necessities. Sabrina, who was unwilling to give up her luxuries and determined to maintain her socialite lifestyle, became increasingly irritable and aggressive, often taking her frustrations out on the young nanny. With their remaining funds, the couple attempted to start a bakery business, but it failed. Sabrina then turned to Walton, asking for a large sum of money to launch her clothing line, but he categorically refused. This led to tears and complaints from Sabrina about poverty. Sabrina frequently vented to Leonette about her ex-lover, and the nanny tried to console her employer. One theory claims Sabrina Kuyder masterminded a blackmail plot targeting Walton. She allegedly planned to frame Sophie as Walton's partner in crime and lover, planted in their home to cause chaos and put their children in danger. Sabrina supposedly believed Walton was using Sophie as a tool for revenge, motivated by the nanny's supposed infatuation with him. Kuyder allegedly wanted to record Sophie's fabricated confessions and present them to the police as evidence, which would be enough to demand compensation from Walton for his alleged wrongdoing. However, Sophie refused to give false statements on camera. An alternative theory, as argued by Kuyder's lawyers in court, suggests that due to her mental health issues, Sabrina genuinely believed in her conspiracy theory, viewing Sophie as an enemy and a threat to her family. According to this version, Sabrina didn't coerce the nanny into giving false testimony. Instead, she sincerely believed Sophie was Walton's accomplice, infiltrating their household to harm them. Sophie's life rapidly deteriorated into a living hell. She was housed in a wealthy home, but it felt like a torture chamber in the basement. At first, her employers piled extra work on her without a pay rise. Soon she was trapped in a relentless routine of chores from dawn till late at night, leaving her no personal time or freedom to leave the house. To make matters worse, her salary was stopped, and her passport was confiscated to prevent her from escaping or returning to France, effectively holding her captive. Her family contact was strictly monitored. The situation only got worse. Sophie was hardly fed and was coerced into making false accusations against Walton, a man she had never met or known. Her communication was limited to screams, insults, and threats, with accusations of theft flying her way. She was warned that she would be imprisoned if she refused to comply with their demands against the musician. Kuyders used brutal tactics when threats failed. Sophie was confined to a cold basement, given scarce food, and physically abused. She grew weak and emaciated. Slaps and hair-pulling escalated to violent assaults, including a broken nose. The beatings became daily, with new cruelties designed to inflict pain. The London house basement became a torture chamber with no escape. In 2017, Sabrina took Sophie Leon, a malnourished and abused 21-year-old nanny, to a police station to testify against Mark Walton. However, when questioned, Sophie remained silent. The police, instead of helping her, allowed everyone to leave despite her obvious signs of abuse, including weighing under 88 pounds, hair loss, a missing tooth, and a limp. In mid-September 2017, Sophie Leon called her mother, Catherine, in tears, confessing that she wanted to return home but lacked the money to do so. Catherine reassured Sophie that she would buy her a ticket and told her to pack her bags immediately. Sadly, this was the last time Catherine would ever hear her daughter's voice. Just a few days later, on the evening of September 20th, 2017, the authorities were alerted by the Queeters' neighbors, who had noticed a fire in the yard. What alarmed them was not the fire itself, but the overpowering, sweetly greasy smell it emitted, which one neighbor likened to the smell of burning flesh and hair, combined with something unidentifiable. The thick smoke lingered, leaving a putrid stench on clothes and skin. When firefighters and police arrived, the homeowners, who seemed strangely calm and oblivious to the reason for the emergency visit, met them after extinguishing the fire. A charred human hand was discovered in the ashes. The couple was promptly arrested, and heavily burned human remains were recovered from the fire. Although the gender and age of the deceased could not be determined initially, the body was eventually identified as Sophie Leonette, recognizable due to the melted metal frame of her distinctive glasses, which were found fused to her skull. The investigation into Sophie Leon's cause of death was highly complex due to the severe fire damage to her body. Despite these challenges, forensic experts discovered evidence of extreme physical abuse, including multiple rib fractures, jaw damage, and blunt force trauma to her skull and limbs, indicating she sustained these injuries while still alive. Further examination revealed missing teeth and severe nose damage, suggesting Sophie endured prolonged and intense beatings, resulting in broken bones and knocked-out teeth. Disturbing video recordings found in the house exposed the sadistic nature of her captors, who tortured and coerced Sophie into confessing to colluding with Walton and intending to harm the children. The videos showed her being beaten with objects such as fists, an iron cord, and a golf club, as well as being subjected to electric shock torture. Additionally, she was humiliated, forced to submerge her head in a toilet until she began to suffocate. Experts believe it is likely that Sophie died from asphyxiation before being burned, sparing her from the agony of being alive during the burning. Sabrina Queeter and Wissem Medouni denied any wrongdoing and displayed no regret for their heinous act. After killing their nanny, Medouni went to a nearby supermarket where he purchased firelighter fluid to burn the body and groceries for his family's dinner, behaving as if nothing untoward had occurred. In March 2018, the court proceedings against the ruthless duo commenced. Sabrina attempted to depict herself as a victim, alleging that Mark Walton's constant harassment had pushed her into a pathological state. However, medical evaluations revealed that although Sabrina suffered from mental health issues, she was not insane and had full awareness of her actions. Wissem, who was physically fit, was psychologically dependent on Sabrina, submitting to her will and obeying her blindly. On June 26, 2018, the court delivered a guilty verdict to the couple, convicting them of torturing, humiliating, and murdering their nanny in exceptionally cruel circumstances. The court handed down life imprisonment sentences with the possibility of parole only after 30 years. Notwithstanding this, both defendants refused to accept responsibility for their actions and instead appealed to reduce their sentences. Sabrina even attempted to fake mental illness to be transferred from prison to a hospital, but this ploy was unsuccessful. Mark Walton, who attended the trial, was overcome with remorse for his ex-partner's brutal actions, which were driven by a warped desire for his attention and financial gain. He offered his heartfelt condolences to the victim's parents and spontaneously pledged a substantial donation to support the grief-stricken family who had lost their beloved daughter. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, to Samantha Ingram, a would-be model and dancer, and Christopher Ingram, a laborer. As the second child, she grew up with her older brother Colin. Shortly after her birth, the family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. After her parents divorced a few years later, her father returned to Virginia and lost contact with his former wife and children. Kelsey developed into a stunning beauty with a perfect figure, ideal for modeling. She wasn't interested in school, preferring to attend parties, go on dates, and participate in events. Her dream was to become famous, feature on magazine covers, give interviews, and walk the red carpet. Although she lacked talent, her youth and good looks were her biggest assets. In high school, Kelsey began attending modeling castings with her mother Samantha's strong support. Samantha had once aspired to be a model herself and was enthusiastic about her daughter's endeavors. However, Kelsey only managed to secure a couple of shoots for clothing catalogs. At 18, Kelsey married Judy Turner when she was already pregnant. Shortly after, she gave birth to a daughter named Beverly. However, their marriage was brief and ended in divorce by the time she was 20. After abandoning her runway modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She created a portfolio featuring provocative photos and submitted them to various publications, which quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey viewed this as the start of a promising career and her path to a glamorous, carefree lifestyle, which she had always aspired to. Over the next few years, she regularly received offers for photo shoots. She enthusiastically gave interviews, attended events, and attempted to establish valuable connections. Notable highlights of her career included one-off shoots for Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo session and interview with 110 magazine. For these opportunities, she traveled to Los Angeles and Las Vegas. In an interview, Kelsey candidly described herself, stating that she was a blonde with a curvy figure and a slim waist, and asked what more one would need for happiness. She also shared that she enjoyed partying, spending time with friends, and living life to the fullest, believing that life is short and should be lived beautifully and joyfully. Kelsey was not overly concerned about her future, frequently changed partners, and quickly spent the money she earned or received from admirers. At 23, Kelsey had another child, a son named Josh, but the father refused to acknowledge him or marry her. As her modeling career declined, Kelsey turned to social media to build a following. She regularly posted provocative photos of herself in swimsuits, lingerie, and revealing outfits, which were heavily edited to make her look like a Barbie doll. She also shared pictures of herself at trendy boutiques, nightclubs, and popular entertainment venues, creating an illusion of a luxurious and carefree life. However, behind this facade, Kelsey, a single mother of 2 young children, was struggling to make ends meet. She didn't know how to manage her finances wisely and spent all her money as soon as she got it. In 2016, Kelsey faced a serious crisis after an incident involving her daughter, who was left traumatized and became withdrawn and mute, despite being physically unharmed. The incident led to therapy sessions with Dr. Thomas Burchard, a renowned child psychiatrist in Monterey, California, which ultimately contributed to a tragic event years later. Dr. Thomas Kirk Burchard was born in Boston, Massachusetts, on February 16, 1948, to a family of a prominent architect and engineer. His family later moved to Virginia, where his father taught at Harvard and the Architectural College at the Technological Institute. Thomas spent his childhood and youth in Virginia. Unlike his father, Thomas chose a career in medicine, specifically child psychology. After graduating from medical school and completing his thesis, Thomas worked as a pediatric psychiatry resident in several prestigious hospitals and lectured at colleges nationwide. Eventually, Dr. Burchard was employed at a public clinical hospital on the Monterey Peninsula in California, where he worked for over 40 years as a highly sought-after pediatric psychiatrist. Dr. Burchard was a highly respected doctor with a reputation for connecting with his young patients and taking on the toughest cases. He had a doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley, and an impressive academic record with over 300 scientific publications, cited nearly 40,000 times, giving him an H-index of 81. He was also known for his kindness, responsiveness, and generosity, particularly towards his young patients from low-income families. He even paid for hospital treatments for sick children and assisted single mothers. Dr. Burchard lived with a woman named D.Y., who was described as his assistant, housekeeper, lover, or fiancée. She was close to him and the first to notice changes in his behavior, which suggested early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. As he approached his 70th birthday, Dr. Burchard became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and inattentive. To cope, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record everything, including names, dates, and events, to avoid confusion. He always carried a notebook with him containing sensitive information like banking details, account numbers, passwords, and card pins. Dr. Thomas Burchard's trusting nature led him to increase his financial support to those in need from hundreds to thousands of dollars. Kelsey Turner took advantage of Dr. Burchard's generosity. During her first visit with her daughter, she tearfully told the doctor that as a single mother of two, she couldn't afford his expensive services. Feeling empathetic, Dr. Burchard offered to treat her child for free and even gave her $300 to help with her children's needs. Kelsey was surprised, but soon realized that by sharing fabricated, tearful stories about her struggles, she could extract more money from the elderly doctor. At their next session, she concocted a performance, tearfully describing her younger son's illness and claiming she couldn't afford his expensive medication. This time, she specified a fake amount, and Dr. Burchard gave it to her in full. Kelsey's luck had changed, and from that point on, she frequently fabricated emotional stories to extract large sums of money from the trusting older man. Instead of using the money to support her children, she spent it on her own leisure activities, luxury clothing, and beauty treatments. Unwilling to return to her hometown in Virginia, Kelsey convinced Thomas to pay for her rental housing in California, claiming it would be easier to find a job and the climate was better for her children. It didn't take much persuasion for the doctor to agree, and he paid for the apartment. There were whispers that Kelsey and Thomas were romantically involved, and that this was the reason the respected doctor accommodated her every request. While these whispers may have held some truth, Kelsey maintained that Thomas had a paternal affection for her and her children, and was helping them selflessly. This was supported in court by Judy, although she added that Kelsey shamelessly took advantage of the doctor's kindness and his declining mental state due to dementia. Thomas paid for Kelsey's rental housing, bills, and gave her large sums of cash for necessities. He also rented a luxurious Mercedes-Benz convertible for her, rather than a practical family vehicle suitable for transporting children safely. As Kelsey's modeling career came to an end, her youth faded, and she stopped receiving offers for photo shoots. But instead of getting a job, she relied on her wealthy benefactor, Thomas, for financial support. Over nearly 3 years, Kelsey tried to break free from Thomas, blackmailing and threatening him. Despite this, he spent around $500,000 on her and her children. However, Kelsey wasted all the money on luxuries, including breast augmentation and liposuction, hoping to revive her modeling career. She prioritized partying over her children, neglecting them in the process. As a result, her ex-husband gained sole custody of their daughter through the court, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. She was left with only her younger son, whose father had never shown interest in his child. Thomas was furious when he discovered what was happening, not because of the girl's ex-husband, but because of Kelsey's behavior. He realized she was a neglectful mother who didn't care for her children and spent all the money meant for them on her own desires, entertainment, and clothes. Dr. Burchard decided to have a serious talk with Kelsey, telling her he would no longer fund her extravagant and idle lifestyle. In response, Kelsey threatened to spread false rumors that the respected child psychiatrist had inappropriate, intimate interests in his young patients. Although this was a lie, any gossip on the matter could severely damage the doctor's reputation. Reluctantly, Burchard agreed to Kelsey's terms and continued to transfer money and pay her bills. In early 2019, Kelsey decided to move to Las Vegas with her son, intending to revive her modeling career. As usual, she expected Thomas, whom she continued to blackmail, to finance this venture. The doctor rented a house that Kelsey had chosen and transferred the amount of money she requested. After this, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months without giving any sign of her whereabouts. In late February 2019, Kelsey resurfaced because she was running out of money. She called Thomas, crying, and told him about her severe illness, inability to work, and struggle to provide for her son. However, when the doctor refused to help, Kelsey's tone changed abruptly, and she began threatening and blackmailing him again. It's crucial to highlight that Judy had been pushing Dr. Burchard for a while to report Kelsey to the authorities, exposing her blackmail and extortion attempts. Judy also recommended getting Child Protective Services involved, considering Kelsey's past, having already lost parental rights to her older daughter, and her inability to properly care for her young son. Anticipating a potential court case, Dr. Burchard took steps to ensure he had the backing of his colleagues, keeping them informed about the situation and securing their promises of support. To persuade Kelsey to leave Thomas alone, Judy previously tried talking to her directly, but Kelsey responded with threats of retaliation. This time, Dr. Burchard decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims, knowing what he would likely find. Judy attempted to discourage him from going, but the elderly man was resolute. She then advised him to bring her or one of his friends along, but Thomas insisted that this was a personal matter that he needed to resolve on his own. Dr. Burchard set out on his journey on March 1st, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists driving through Nevada took a detour from the main highway onto a dirt road leading to Lake Mead. They stumbled upon a solitary Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the middle of the desert with its windows up and roof closed, but no one in sight. The tourists found this suspicious and decided to investigate. As they approached the vehicle, they noticed one of the windows was shattered. Upon peering inside, they discovered signs of a violent struggle with bloodstains throughout the interior. The tourists promptly reported their disturbing discovery to the police. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene around noon, greeted by an overwhelming stench of decay under the scorching sun. The source of the odor was quickly located when they opened the trunk of the car. Beneath a pile of items and rags, they found the lifeless body of an elderly man, next to whom lay a blood-stained baseball bat. It was later confirmed that the body belonged to Dr. Burchard, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy had reported his disappearance on March 2nd, when she couldn't reach him at their scheduled time, and she immediately feared the worst. She contacted the police, hoping against hope that he would be found alive. Tragically, that was not the case. The autopsy revealed a horrific series of injuries on the elderly man's body. He had sustained multiple abrasions, bruises, and superficial cuts. The examination also showed that he had suffered severe head injuries, likely inflicted by the baseball bat found beside him in the trunk. Part of his ear had been severed, and his hands bore numerous cuts, suggesting a desperate attempt to defend himself. Additionally, there were bruises on his face with a peculiar imprinted pattern. The most shocking discovery, however, was that the man had been placed in the trunk while still alive, where he slowly suffocated under the intense desert sun. As the police investigated the crime scene, they discovered that the car was rented in Kelsey Turner's name, making her the prime suspect. Judy provided the authorities with the address of the house where the blonde lived and where the deceased doctor had gone, as it was also rented in his name. However, when the police arrived, they found the house empty. Inside, they noticed scattered containers of cleaning agents and a strong smell of household chemicals, indicating a hasty attempt to erase any evidence of the crime. The house had been occupied by Turner, her 4-year-old son, her new boyfriend John Logan Kennison, and 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. Since they had all fled, they became suspects, as it seemed unlikely that the petite blonde could have inflicted such severe injuries on the doctor or moved his body to the car trunk alone. The police managed to interview Jeremy, who recalled that he and his girlfriend had left the house while the doctor was still alive and unharmed. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had drunk too much and flirted with the doctor, trying to get a few $100s, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This had enraged Kelsey, who accused the woman of trying to steal her boyfriend. The 2 women almost got into a fight, and Jeremy had to quickly take his girlfriend away from the house. He hadn't returned for several days and was unaware of the subsequent events. Police discovered that Dr. Burchard habitually carried a notebook containing bank account details and passwords, but frequently misplaced it. Following his murder, the notebook went missing, and substantial sums were withdrawn from 2 of his accounts on March 3rd. The authorities promptly blocked the accounts and cards, and on March 21st, Kelsey and her boyfriend JN were apprehended in Stockton, California, after a second attempt to withdraw funds. Prior to their arrest, the couple, accompanied by their child, had been evading detection by hiding in motels, constantly changing their location and paying in cash. They later expressed regret for not completely depleting Burchard's accounts initially, and subsequently planned to empty them and flee to Mexico with the money. However, by the time they made their second attempt, the authorities had already blocked the accounts, leading to their capture. According to Diana, after Jeremy and his girlfriend left, a heated argument broke out between Turner and Dr. Burchard. This was triggered by the doctor's refusal to give Turner another cent. In a fit of rage, Turner threatened to ruin Dr. Burchard's reputation by spreading false rumors about his behavior with his young patients. As the situation escalated and Turner became physically aggressive, Dr. Burchard locked himself in a room for safety. However, JN forced open the door and violently attacked the elderly doctor with a bat, causing a severe hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana intervened, begging everyone to calm down. Upon seeing Dr. Burchard's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, worried about the consequences of their actions. Before they left, Dr. Burchard promised Diana that he would report to the police that he was attacked and robbed by strangers. The 4 of them then drove to the garage, where Dr. Burchard was seated in the back of the car. Kelsey instructed Diana to return to the house and thoroughly clean up, making sure to remove all traces of blood. Diana started cleaning as told, but heard Dr. Burchard's cries from the garage. Rushing back, she saw Kelsey and Kennison brutally attacking him, trapping him in the car. It was clear they never meant to take him to the hospital, but planned to kill him with a bat and knife. Diana was forced back to cleaning, fearing for her life. Later, she heard the cars drive away, and only Johns returned with Kelsey. From the start, Diana chose to cooperate with the authorities by agreeing to a plea deal, which meant she would reveal everything she knew about the case. In return, she avoided being charged with being an accomplice and received a relatively light 3-year sentence for tampering with evidence. In contrast, her former lovers refused to take responsibility and instead blamed each other for the crime. However, it was easy to prove their guilt because they left behind significant evidence in the car, and phone records showed they were in the desert on the night of March 2nd, where the car with the body was abandoned. Kennison was convicted of second-degree homicide and received a 45-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The situation with Turner was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, which significantly delayed her trial. While in prison, she gave birth to a girl, and both the newborn and her son were placed in the care of social services because none of Turner's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. In January 2023, following her lawyer's advice, Kelsey Turner admitted her guilt and was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 10 years from the start of her sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Las Vegas. In conclusion, it is worth noting that ABC's documentary series 20th Century aired an episode in February 2023 titled A Model Murder, which detailed the heinous crime committed by Turner and her boyfriend against Dr. Burchard. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts, born Victoria Smith, was born in September 1984 in Cheshire, England. She grew up in a conservative and religious family with an older sister. The sisters attended a Christian school where they developed their musical talents and sang in the choir. Vicki was known for being kind, friendly, and helpful, always willing to lend a hand. After high school, Vicki enrolled in university and worked part-time at an IKEA store to fund her education. That's where she met Michael Roberts, a charismatic and sociable young man who was only a year older than her. Michael was also a student and an athlete who took care of his appearance. Initially, Vicki found Michael too talkative and intrusive, but he eventually won her over with his charming personality. Michael was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, to a prominent chemical engineer and his family. As the eldest of two sons, Michael was raised with high expectations and strict discipline. His parents instilled in him the belief that he was destined for greatness, and Michael grew up to be ambitious, driven, and confident. He was a natural socialite, effortlessly making friends and commanding attention with his charismatic personality. His striking appearance, sense of humor, and intellectual curiosity only added to his charm. However, his parents' constant praise and emphasis on his superiority may have contributed to Michael's growing narcissism, which intensified over time. Michael desperately wanted to please his parents, so he strived to be the perfect son and meet their expectations. Meanwhile, Roberts, a womanizer, had a string of girlfriends and mistresses. He was skilled at secretly dating multiple people simultaneously, making each one believe they were the only one. He got a thrill from pursuing girls, particularly those who seemed out of his reach. One such girl was Vicki, who Michael was determined to win over. Initially, she kept him at arm's length, rejecting even his casual invitations to walk together after work or grab coffee. Vicki was a dedicated student and devoted her free time to church activities, leaving no room for dating or romance. It took Michael a few months to convince Vicki to go out with him. He won her over with his charming and sweet nature, showering her with flowers, gifts, and little surprises. He even took her to meet his parents, who adored her and gave their seal of approval for their son's choice. Vicki was convinced of his sincerity and eventually agreed to be his girlfriend. Michael became her first love and for a while, her only one. She was deeply happy with him, and it seemed like destiny had brought them together. Michael, too, seemed to fall in love and was ready to settle down, but their happiness was short-lived. From the outside, their relationship looked perfect. They were both young, attractive, full of energy, ambitious, and had big plans for the future. However, Vicki soon discovered that Michael had an irrepressible sexual appetite and a passion for experimentation in bed. At first, Michael didn't pressure Vicki too much, fearing she would leave him. But once he was confident she wouldn't go anywhere, he revealed his true desires. The modest and religious Vicki was shocked by what was happening, but she was deeply in love with Michael and trusted him. For a long time, she kept their bedroom secrets hidden behind closed doors. Michael made her an official marriage proposal, which she happily accepted. She genuinely believed that after the wedding, her fiancé would stop his extreme experiments. Meanwhile, one of Vicki's closest friends began to notice that she was hiding bruises and small injuries under her clothes. The friend confronted Vicki, asking if her fiancé was abusing her and if she needed help. At first, Vicki denied everything, but eventually admitted that the marks were a result of her fiancé's extreme intimate experiments. Michael had a strong passion for bondage, and using various toys and devices. Vicky confided in her friend that they had intimate encounters up to 5 times a day, but Michael still remained unsatisfied. He saw himself as a skilled lover, and intimacy was an art form and a way for him to express himself. Although Michael occasionally made concessions when Vicky refused to participate in some of his dangerous experiments, he usually managed to convince her to go along with his desires. After defending her diploma, Vic found herself facing an unplanned pregnancy, which prompted her to change jobs. She was soon hired as an account manager at a logistics company. Around the same time, Michael left IKEA and began working as a sales consultant at a large retail chain selling electronics. Michael flourished in his new role, leveraging his charisma, communication, and persuasive skills to consistently exceed sales targets. As a result, he quickly rose through the ranks, earning a promotion to senior sales. The management even considered transferring him to the main office, but first he needed to undergo training and improve his qualifications. As Michael attended training sessions and traveled to London for business, he felt proud and accomplished. However, in the process, he began to neglect his young fiancée, Vic. He only seemed to remember her existence when he needed intimacy, and their relationship suffered as a result. They stopped talking, hardly spent time together, and outside of the bedroom, Vic seemed to be invisible to him. Michael started having numerous affairs with co-workers, clients, and mere acquaintances while simultaneously planning his wedding to Vicky. He had an insatiable appetite for intimacy with various women, which boosted his self-esteem and gave him a sense of accomplishment. When Vicky discovered she was pregnant, she excitedly shared the news with Michael, expecting him to expedite their wedding plans. However, Michael's reaction was one of anger and frustration. He insisted that Vicky terminate the pregnancy, citing their young age and the idea that they had their whole lives ahead of them to have children. Vicky was shocked by his demand, but refused to consider abortion, prompting Michael to try to persuade her through other means. Michael convinced the bride, Vicky, that if her religious parents found out she was pregnant and living with him out of wedlock, they would be furious. He promised that they would keep the abortion a secret and have children after they got married. Vicky was torn, but Michael's persuasive nature eventually won her over, and she had the procedure. However, the abortion came with complications, and Vicky spent several days in the hospital, followed by 3 weeks of recovery. The doctor strictly forbade her from having sex during this time, which sent Michael into a rage. It dawned on Vicky that Michael had mental health issues and a sex addiction. Without intimacy, he became unhinged, often leaving the house, claiming he had urgent work matters to attend to. Vicky suspected that Michael was seeking intimacy outside their relationship, but she genuinely believed that everything would change after they got married, and she could help him overcome his infidelity. However, their 2-year engagement revealed a different reality. Michael had no intention of marrying Vicky, as his current situation suited him perfectly. He had a loyal fiancée at home who took care of his household needs, as well as multiple mistresses on the side, whom he regularly replaced. Vicky always took Michael's promises at face value, even when she discovered his infidelity. She forgave him as long as he assured her it was the last time and that he would change. However, as time passed, Vicky began to pressure Michael for marriage, as she wanted a complete family and children. Her parents also increasingly raised this question, but what ultimately pushed the issue was the insistence of Michael's parents, whom he didn't want to disappoint. Vicky was a kind and sweet person whom everyone loved. Her parents-in-law adored her and considered her an ideal match for their son. They were eager to see the couple get married and have grandchildren. With the help of their parents, the couple organized a grand wedding with all the trimmings, including a white dress and a limousine. The newlyweds looked happy and in love, with a long and fulfilling life ahead of them. After the wedding, the couple settled into a large and cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, not far from Robert's parents. However, what the relatives didn't know was that Michael had a dark side that Vicky was already well aware of. Despite being married, Michael did not love Vicky and only saw her as a way to appear normal in the eyes of others. Vicky never complained about Michael's infidelities and strange behaviors, and he was able to continue cheating on her without anyone suspecting a thing. At work, Michael was successful, earning promotions and a good salary after being transferred to a new office. Michael's direct supervisor, Carrie Hall, was a 10-year-old older, divorced mother who worked as the head of administration at Phones 4u. Despite her busy schedule, she was attractive, well-groomed, and strong-willed as required by her position. For a long time, she ignored the signs of attention from her young subordinate, Michael. However, Michael saw this as a challenge and made a concerted effort to win her over, using his natural charm and eloquence. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated and they began a romantic relationship, secretly meeting in hotel rooms. Carrie described their relationship as turbulent, passionate, and experimental. As a mature, self-confident woman, Carrie was flattered by the attention of a younger man and was open to trying new things. With her, Michael could fulfill his fantasies that he couldn't with his modest wife. Michael frequently deceived his wife by claiming he was working late or attending corporate trainings, when in reality, he was meeting his mistress. He confided in his mistress about his unhappiness in his marriage, calling it a youthful mistake and expressing his willingness to divorce his wife. However, he failed to take action as his wife refused to grant him a divorce. The affair with Carrie lasted over a year, but she didn't pressure him for divorce. Content with their secret hotel trysts, physical marks, and risky games, Carrie, a sports enthusiast who always took pride in her figure, suddenly changed her style after starting a relationship with Michael. She began wearing long-sleeved, high-necked clothes, which was unusual for her. A concerned friend noticed the change and Carrie confided in her about Michael's unusual intimate preferences. She revealed that Michael enjoyed experimenting with rough, controlling behaviors, such as biting, squeezing, and tying her up. Carrie showed her friend the physical marks these activities had left on her body. Although her friend urged her to go to the police, Carrie refused, saying that she had consented to these activities and that Michael usually warned her beforehand. However, she admitted that things sometimes got out of control, like when Michael would strangle her to supposedly enhance her pleasure, causing her to lose consciousness. Despite fearing these strangulation games, Carrie continued to succumb to Michael's persuasion, hoping that he would eventually tire of these cruel experiments or that she would become desensitized to them. Michael's wife and mistresses didn't try to intervene. Before they got married, Vicky had already suspected Michael's infidelity through open letters and a love letter. Despite knowing about his affairs, she believed her love and care could transform him into an exemplary family man. However, after their wedding, the situation deteriorated, and Michael convincingly denied his cheating. Vicky decided to investigate her husband's infidelity by looking through his phone while he was asleep. She was shocked to discover numerous intimate conversations between Michael and Carrie, as well as other girls, including explicit photos. Despite her devastation, Vicky did not want to upset her family, so she kept the discovery to herself and moved in with a friend instead of telling her parents and sister. Before leaving, Vicky wrote a heartfelt letter to Michael, confessing her love for him and acknowledging that he was the central figure in her life. However, she also made it clear that she was aware of his infidelity and would not tolerate it. Vicky informed Michael that she was giving him time to reflect on their relationship, but she would not stay in the marriage if his behavior continued. She wrote the letter by hand and left it on the refrigerator for him to find. Michael didn't feel emotional about the message, nor was he upset by his wife's departure. However, he didn't want to lose the comfort of having a quiet and obedient partner who took care of the household and put up with his quirky behavior and unusual tastes. That same evening, Michael went to Vicky's friend's house, bringing a large bouquet of flowers. He got down on his knees, apologized, and begged Vicky to come back to him, promising to be faithful and making her his one and only. Vicky wanted to believe him and decided to return home, where a new mistress was waiting. Michael didn't stop seeing Carrie, but he became more cautious and even made an effort to come home for dinner, which his wife had carefully prepared. He deleted messages on his phone, changed the password on his social media profiles, and started an affair with a young employee named Karen Wilson, who was engaged to be married. Despite this, Michael pursued Karen relentlessly, making himself out to be a miserable and unhappy lover. He was so drawn to Karen that after 2 months, he decided to end things with 33-year-old Carrie Hall, whom he had grown tired of. Michael told Karen a fabricated story about being unhappy in his marriage and promised to leave his wife soon. Karen eventually gave in, and they became intimate in the office. A week later, she broke off her engagement and waited for Michael to follow through on his promise. Michael didn't plan to divorce Vicky, but he wanted to end their connection and start a new relationship with another woman. To achieve this, he lied to Vicky, telling her that he had already filed for divorce and moved in with his parents. This was a fatal mistake, as Vicky became suspicious that he was still cheating on her. Decided to take action, Vicky waited until Michael was in the shower and took his phone, but she found nothing incriminating because he had deleted all text messages and changed the password on his social media account. Undeterred, Vicky waited until Michael fell asleep and then took his work laptop, where she discovered his account on the social network was still active. On the laptop, she found conversations with his new girlfriend, in which he confessed his love, claimed to be divorcing his wife, and said he was living with his parents. The discovery was a huge shock for Vicky. She took screenshots of the intimate messages as proof of her husband's infidelity and saved them on her laptop. She also found several hotel room receipts in his wallet, which further implicated him. The next morning, Vicky confronted Michael with the evidence, and for the first time in their relationship, she lost her temper. Michael tried to apologize and promised to change, but Vicky threatened to tell his parents everything, hoping they could finally make him see sense. Michael was furious when his wife Vicky threatened to reveal his secrets to his parents. In a fit of rage, he slapped her. Vicky, determined to carry out her threat, got up and headed for the door. Michael caught up with her, grabbed a heavy jewelry box from the dressing table, and hit her twice on the head, knocking her unconscious. Then, he squeezed her throat with his hands until she stopped breathing. With no remorse, Michael wrapped Vicky's lifeless body in a blanket, packed it into several large garbage bags, and carried it to the garage. He then quickly cleaned up the house, removing most of Vicky's belongings. After calling Karen, he invited her over and they had dinner, enjoying themselves in the same house where he had just murdered his wife. The next day, Michael ran off with Karen, leaving behind the scene of his crime. Michael told his parents that his wife had left him for another man. To convince them, he went to their home, cried on his mother's shoulder, and showed her messages on his wife's phone. But what he didn't reveal was that he had sent those messages himself, pretending to be his wife. The messages said that she had lost interest in him, met someone else, and wanted to live with this new person. Meanwhile, Michael also sent messages to his wife's parents from her phone, saying that she had fallen in love with someone else, left with him, and asked them not to contact her and give her space. The Smiths, concerned about their daughter Vicky, immediately tried to contact her, but their calls were consistently rejected. In response, they only received messages asking them to give her time, which seemed strange to them. They then decided to visit Michael's house to get some answers, but his story only raised more questions and doubts. When they discovered that Vicky had stopped showing up for work without warning, they became even more worried and decided to file a police report. On December 1st, 2009, the police launched an investigation. It was discovered that Michael had purchased a shovel, rope, rags, and detergents from a hardware store that day, which seemed suspicious. However, he hadn't disposed of the body by the time the police arrived at his home. Although the police didn't find anything incriminating, Michael's behavior and story raised many questions. What was particularly striking was that they overlooked a large package in the corner of the garage. During the initial inspection of the marital home, no signs of the missing woman's clothes, documents, or personal belongings were found, suggesting that she might have voluntarily left. However, Vicky's laptop was discovered in the bedroom, and upon seizing it, the police found screenshots of Michael's conversations with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved. The police then requested a geolocation of Vicky's cell phone, which regularly received messages from her husband and relatives. The search revealed that the phone had been in the marital home the entire time. In a subsequent search of the Roberts home, law enforcement officials made a disturbing discovery in the garage. But just as they were processing this new evidence, Michael suddenly vanished from under their noses, taking a wallet with cash that allowed him to remain hidden for several days. Michael's money ran out, so he turned to one of his mistresses, Lavina T., asking to stay with her for a while. However, one evening, she heard on the news that Michael was wanted for murdering his wife. Without hesitation, she reported his whereabouts to the police, leading to his arrest. When questioned, Michael broke down in tears, claiming he was innocent. He insisted that his wife's death was an accident, resulting from a consensual intimate game where she asked him to strangle her with a rope belt, but he overdid it. However, forensic experts uncovered contradictory evidence. The autopsy revealed that Michael's wife was strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 extensive hematomas on her head that occurred before her death, ruling out any connection to the alleged intimate game. Michael's trial began in January 2010, where he continued to plead innocence and hoped for leniency. Nevertheless, the autopsy results proved that Michael brutally hit his wife twice on the head and then strangled her, hiding her body in the garage. Michael Roberts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, but with the possibility of parole after serving 17 years. This means that, if he demonstrates good behavior, he may be eligible for release as early as 2027. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nancy Paola Reyes. Nancy Paola Reyes Gorcey was born on April 13, 1991, in Granados, Guatemala, to Jorge and Pren Gorcey, a poor family of 7. Despite their financial struggles, her parents were determined to provide their 5 children with a good education, hoping they would have better lives. Nancy excelled in school, which enabled her to enroll in the University of Villanua, where she earned a degree in business administration and document management with honors. However, her academic achievements did not immediately translate to career success. She worked part-time as a cashier and later became an administrator at a supermarket, but her professional growth stagnated. During her university years, Nancy was in an unregistered marriage with a man whose identity remains private, and they had 2 daughters together. Unfortunately, the relationship ended and the couple separated. The father of the children lost interest in their well-being and failed to provide financial support. Nancy lived with her parents and daughters, working at a supermarket with no clear future prospects. The family struggled financially, barely covering essential expenses. However, Nancy's older sister's decision to immigrate to the U.S. in 2013 changed everything. Her sister found a good job, got married, and settled down, inspiring Nancy to make a similar change. Instead of the U.S., Nancy chose to relocate to sunny Spain. The problem was that Nancy didn't have enough money to buy a one-way plane ticket, let alone cover initial expenses. So she worked hard for several years, saving diligently until she finally had enough money to make her dream a reality. In July 2018, Nancy bought a ticket to Madrid, promising her parents she would stay in touch to alleviate their worries. Her plan was to find a place to live and a job upon arrival, with a few €1,000 to cover rent, food, and essentials until she could secure a steady income. When Nancy left, she was 27 years old, and her daughters, who stayed with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. After a brief stay in Madrid, Nancy moved to Barcelona and later settled in Cádiz, the capital of the province of Cádiz, Spain. She kept in close touch with her family, calling home almost every day to check in on them and regularly sending money to support them. Over time, her remittances enabled her parents not only to support themselves and her daughters, but also to renovate their old house. Although Nancy didn't have a steady job, she made a living by doing odd jobs like cleaning houses for wealthy families and caring for the elderly and sick. Despite the challenges, Nancy never complained and was optimistic about her decision to move to Europe, where she believed she had more opportunities. She was convinced that she could never have earned as much back in Guatemala, even if she worked non-stop without days off. Nancy was pleased with her new life and even planned to bring her daughters to Spain once she had saved enough to rent a comfortable and spacious home for the whole family. Nancy initially kept her personal life private, citing her busy work schedule as the reason. However, in the spring of 2020, she confided in her parents about meeting Carlos Andrés Bustamante, with whom she had begun a romantic relationship. The two had met by chance while Nancy was searching for a new place to live, and as they spent more time together, their relationship blossomed. They eventually moved in together, with Carlos being a year older than Nancy. At the start of their relationship, Carlos didn't have a steady income, relying on small, odd jobs to get by. As a result, Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering their housing and bills, and often providing financial support for Carlos's personal expenses. Despite this, Nancy never expressed any concerns to her family, leading them to believe that she had found a loving and supportive partner. Nancy's two younger brothers had also relocated to Spain, and she remained in close contact with them, especially Dennis, the youngest, who had met Carlos and found him likable. In June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to move to Santander, a resort city on the Atlantic coast. When Nancy spoke with her family, she mentioned that the climate was warmer and there were more job opportunities. However, this was when problems in her relationship with Carlos started to emerge, which she tried to keep hidden. Carlos turned out to be jealous, hot-tempered, and even cruel. He had no career ambitions and was content to be supported by Nancy. Moreover, he struggled with alcohol abuse and occasionally used prohibited substances, despite repeatedly promising to quit and find a stable job. When Nancy discovered she was pregnant, she was already questioning whether to continue her life with Carlos. Carlos was overjoyed by the news and promised that their life would improve, but in reality, things only worsened. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from Nancy or asking his mother for it. Worse still, he began physically abusing Nancy, which she tried to conceal from everyone. On the evening of August 12th, a disturbing scene unfolded while Nancy was video chatting with her parents. Her partner, Carlos, suddenly burst into a fit of rage, yelling at Nancy and demanding to know who she was talking to. Refusing to believe her when she told him it was her mother, he snatched the phone from her hands. After verifying the truth by glancing at the screen, he carelessly tossed the device onto a chair and walked away. The very next day, a similar incident occurred. Carlos again wrestled the phone from Nancy's hands while she was speaking with her parents and daughters. He insisted on knowing who she was talking to, hurled insults at her, and even made threats. A terrified Nancy later attempted to downplay the situation to her relatives, attributing Carlos's behavior to excessive jealousy and assuring them that everything was under control. However, her concerned parents urged her to report the incidents to the police, but Nancy insisted on handling the matter herself. On August 17th, Nancy had a concerning phone conversation with her sister. She stated that if anything happened to her, Carlos would be responsible. Although her words were ominous, she didn't explain further, only asking her sister to take care of her children if needed. This was the last time her sister heard from Nancy. Nancy vanished on August 20th around 2 p.m. She sent a text to her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did. Her family tried contacting Carlos, but he didn't respond either. The situation was alarming because the couple had recently moved to Santander, had no friends there, and Nancy's brothers were on the other side of the country. A few days later, a suspicious message came from Carlos's phone, claiming that he and Nancy had argued and decided to separate. The message stated that Nancy had left to find a new apartment, ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy's brothers suggested that Carlos come to Ciudad Real to file a missing person report with them. Carlos agreed, but he never showed up, didn't file the report, and ceased communicating with the family. Nancy's relatives reached out to the police to file a report about her disappearance. In the meantime, Nancy's friends provided her brothers with the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, she became emotional and confessed that she had suspected her son might do something harmful to his partner, but she didn't provide any specific details. Sandra also claimed to have no knowledge about the whereabouts of her son and his fiancée. Although Carlos wasn't answering her calls, he sent her brief messages asking her to stop inquiring and to give him some time. Despite liking Nancy, Sandra was aware of her son's capabilities and understood his true nature. Sandra went to the police station the next day for questioning about Nancy's disappearance. She told the officers what she had already shared with Nancy's brothers: Carlos's troubling behavior and a lengthy text message from Nancy. In the message, Nancy warned Sandra not to give Carlos any money because he would waste it on alcohol and drugs, which made him aggressive and cruel. Nancy said Carlos had no intention of finding a job or overcoming his addictions, and his behavior had become increasingly threatening, making her consider leaving him. She believed it was better to end their relationship before someone got hurt. The investigation also uncovered some disturbing information about Carlos. He had been convicted of bodily harm multiple times, including brutally beating his own mother when he was 17. Although he only received probation at the time, he later served short sentences for assaulting women he lived with and had relationships with. The investigation into Carlos and Nancy's relationship revealed many red flags from the start. Carlos had a history of aggression, drug addiction, and a criminal record, which was compounded by his uncontrollable rage. Meanwhile, Nancy's friends disclosed that she was not just a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had claimed. Instead, she was providing escort services to wealthy clients in Santander, earning a substantial income. Carlos was aware of her occupation and initially accepted it, as it allowed him to avoid finding work himself. However, when Nancy became pregnant, Carlos's behavior became increasingly erratic. He grew suspicious about the child's paternity, wondering if it belonged to one of her clients. Additionally, he was consumed by jealousy, vacillating between preventing her from interacting with other men and forcing her to continue working to support them financially. Meanwhile, Carlos squandered the money he took from his mother on his own vices, leaving them struggling to make ends meet. After nearly a week of unexplained absence, Nancy and Carlos's whereabouts were unknown. Although Carlos had been in touch through messages, he never revealed his location. It wasn't until August 26th that police finally obtained a search warrant for the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. The discovery they made was gruesome and left no doubt that Nancy had met a tragic end. Bloodstains were found throughout the apartment, with some attempts made to clean them up, but most were still visible to the naked eye, including in the clogged bathroom and toilet drains. The police also found fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs. Forensic analysis confirmed that these belonged to Nancy, even though her body was not found in the apartment. The crime scene suggested that Nancy had been brutally killed, dismembered in the bathroom, and her remains disposed of elsewhere. Carlos was quickly identified as the main suspect in the case due to evidence found in the apartment, including a package from a local hardware store with his fingerprints on it. The package was for a small hatchet, but the tool itself was not discovered. Further investigation revealed that Carlos had bought the hatchet, along with rubber gloves and large trash bags, at a nearby market on August 20th. This was confirmed by security footage from the store. An elderly vendor who sold Carlos a small cart also positively identified him from a photo. The day after the gruesome discovery in the apartment, Carlos surprisingly surrendered to a Madrid police station, attempting to shift suspicion away from himself. He claimed to be reporting Nancy missing, but was promptly arrested as the prime suspect in the heinous crime. Carlos professed his innocence, stating that he and Nancy had argued and parted ways on August 20th, after which he left town in an emotional state, unaware of any subsequent events involving Nancy. He suggested that someone might have attacked her when she returned to gather her belongings. However, Carlos's alibi seemed dubious, especially considering the police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. Despite conducting an extensive search of nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with the help of divers, no trace of Nancy was found. To further investigate, the police tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th, using his mobile phone signals, revealing that he had spent 3 days traveling along the coast and visiting Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was clear that Carlos was trying to conceal his activities, but it seemed unlikely that he would travel across the country with a dismembered body, leading authorities to continue their search in Santander. Street surveillance footage captured Carlos's movements on the evening of August 20th. He was seen walking towards a large forest park, but returned to his apartment late at night. He then left again, this time pushing a cart filled with unusual, oddly shaped bags. Since there were few cameras within the park, Carlos vanished from view once he entered the wooded area. Later, he re-emerged with the same cart, but it was now significantly lighter. He then proceeded towards the railway tracks, which were located near a steep cliff overgrown with bushes. After visiting this area, Carlos returned once more, but this time without the extra weight, providing law enforcement with a clear lead on where to search for the body. On September 16th, police discovered bags containing badly decomposed human remains in a heavily overgrown area on a hillside. The remains were identified as those of Nancy Gorcey, who had been dismembered into 20 parts using a hatchet. Although security camera footage showed everything Carlos had transported in a cart was recovered, one crucial item was still missing: the fetus of the 4-month pregnant Nancy. The state of the victim's genitals and lower abdomen revealed a brutal mutilation with a knife and hatchet, suggesting that the killer had removed the fetus and disposed of it separately from the mother's body. Despite mounting evidence, Carlos refused to admit his involvement, providing contradictory statements and trying to shift the blame onto an unknown attacker. However, traces of Nancy's blood were found on his clothes and shoes, which he had attempted to wash off but failed to completely remove. Through diligent investigation, authorities were able to reconstruct the sequence of tragic events and the entire scenario of the crime, ultimately incriminating Carlos. Forensic experts have reconstructed the events of August 20th. After an argument, the man brutally beat and strangled his pregnant partner, Nancy, in the kitchen, where bloodstains were later found on the floor and walls. Next, he moved Nancy's body to the bathroom, went shopping at a hardware store in the market, and then used a hatchet and large kitchen knife to dismember her body into 20 pieces. He placed the pieces in bags and loaded them into a cart. That night, he took the cart to a park, searching for secluded areas to dispose of the body parts. He followed a pre-planned route, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. The fate of the fetus removed from Nancy's body remains unknown. Carlos denied his guilt, claiming to have loved Nancy from the time of the murder until his arrest in Madrid. He used the money he stole from Nancy to fund his daily bar hopping across various cities. The investigation and search for evidence and witnesses took nearly 2 years, and the trial did not begin until July 2022. In November 2022, Carlos was found guilty of the premeditated, brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. However, many considered the sentence too lenient. Carlos was sentenced to 25.5 years in prison and ordered to pay €150,000 in compensation to Nancy's parents and daughters.